Imagine you are standing on a cobblestone path in the late 14th century. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. It is deep into the night, and the usual silence of the village is broken by a low rhythmic chanting that seems to vibrate through the very soles of your boots. You pull your heavy wool cloak tighter against the chill, watching as flickering torchlight dances across the uneven stone walls. You are a stranger here, an outsider who has wandered into a world where the rules of logic have been suspended for a single chaotic day. This is a time of strange inversions and sacred madness. As you move deeper into the shadows, you begin to realize that the festival unfolding before you is unlike anything you have ever seen. Tonight, the commoners wear crowns and the world is turned entirely upside down. The sun is beginning to dip below the jagged horizon of timber-framed houses and slate roofs, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch across the uneven ground beneath your feet. You are standing at the edge of a medieval square, and the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, damp stone, and the distant, briny smell of a river that flows just beyond the city walls. It is that particular moment of the day when the sharp edges of reality begin to blur. The golden light of the afternoon has turned into a deep, bruised purple, and the world is settling into the quiet hum of the evening. But as you look around, you realize that this is not a typical evening of rest and prayer. There is a vibration in the air, a sense of suppressed energy that hums like a wire stretched too tight. You take a step forward, and your boots make a dull, rhythmic thud against the cobblestones. These stones have been worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, by the iron-rimmed wheels of carts, and by the hooves of heavy workhorses. They are slick with a thin sheen of evening mist, reflecting the faint, flickering glow of the few torches that have already been lit. To your left, a tall, narrow house leans precariously over the street, its upper stories reaching out as if trying to touch the building across the way. The dark wood of its skeleton is ancient, etched with the scars of winter storms and summer heat. You can see the faint glimmer of a tallow candle in a window high above, casting a weak, buttery light through a pane of clouded glass. As you walk deeper into the heart of the town, you notice that the usual sounds of the workday are fading. The rhythmic clanging of the blacksmith's hammer has stopped. The shouts of the merchants in the market square have died down to a murmur. Instead, there is a new sound rising from the narrow alleys and the dark doorways. It is a sound of whispers, of rustling fabric, and the occasional sharp, nervous laugh that cuts through the stillness. You pass an arched stone gateway, its surface covered in moss and the fine, intricate carvings of saints and gargoyles. Normally, these stone figures look down with a stern, watchful gaze, reminding the citizens of their duties and their place in the cosmic order. But tonight, in the shifting twilight, the gargoyles seem to be wearing a different expression. Their stony grins look wider, more mischievous, as if they are in on a secret that you have yet to fully understand. The social hierarchy of this world is usually as rigid as the stone of the cathedral that looms in the distance. Every person has a place, a role, and a set of expectations that define their entire existence from birth to death. The Lord sits in his hall, the priest stands at his altar, and the peasant works his field. This order is the foundation of their universe, the thing that keeps the chaos of the wild world at bay. Yet, as the last sliver of the sun disappears, you feel that foundation beginning to soften. You see a group of young men standing in the shadow of a tavern, their voices low. They are not dressed in their usual rough tunics of undyed wool. One of them is holding a piece of brightly colored silk, a vibrant crimson that catches the torchlight, while another is adjusting a hat adorned with a single oversized peacock feather. They look like they are preparing for a play, yet there is no stage in sight. You continue your walk, moving toward the great cathedral that sits like a silent giant at the center of the town. Its spires reach up into the darkening sky, disappearing into the gloom. The architecture is a marvel of balance and tension, with flying buttresses that look like the ribs of a prehistoric creature. This building is the anchor of the community, the place where the celestial and the earthly meet. Usually, it is a place of profound solemnity, where the air is heavy with the scent of frankincense and the low drone of Latin chants. But as you approach the massive oak doors, you see something that makes you pause. A group of low-ranking clerics and altar boys are gathered on the steps, and they are not behaving with the quiet reverence expected of their station. They are pushing and shoving one another, their faces flushed with excitement. One of them has his robes tucked up into his belt, revealing a pair of mismatched toes underneath. You realize then that you are witnessing the threshold of a transformation. In the medieval mind, there is a time for everything, and tonight is the time for the world to turn inside out. This is the eve of a festival that defies the very logic of the Middle Ages. It is a safety valve for the soul, a period where the pressure of a strictly regulated life is allowed to vent in a burst of controlled madness. You walk past the cathedral and find yourself in a wider plaza where a bonfire is being built. Men are hauling great logs and bundles of dry brush, stacking them high into a pyramid. The smell of pine resin is sharp and sweet, cutting through the heavier scents of the city. The people you pass seem to be shedding their everyday identities like old skins. You see a woman who, by her calloused hands and simple headscarf, is clearly a laundress, but she is carrying a wooden scepter topped with a carved jester's head. She catches your eye and gives a playful bow, her eyes sparkling with a temporary borrowed authority. In this moment she is not a servant of the wealthy. She is a participant in a grand, fleeting illusion. The cobblestones beneath you seem to pulse with the footsteps of hundreds of people moving toward the center of the town, drawn by an invisible tide. You follow the flow of the crowd, turning down a street so narrow that you can touch the walls on either side with your outstretched hands. The air here is cooler, trapped between the high buildings. You hear the sound of a lute being tuned, a series of bright, discordant notes that echo off the stone. Someone is singing a bawdy song in a language you only half recognize, the lyrics full of puns and double meanings that would be scandalous on any other day of the year. The boundaries between the sacred and the profane are becoming porous. You pass a small shrine set into a wall, a statue of a weeping Virgin Mary. Someone has placed a small, crudely carved wooden mask at her feet, a representation of a laughing face with an exaggerated nose. It is not an act of desecration, but rather an invitation for the divine to witness the comedy of human existence. As the twilight deepens into a true darkness, the only light comes from the torches and the growing glow of the bonfire in the plaza behind you. The shadows are no longer just absences of light. They have become active participants in the scene, dancing across the timber frames and distorting the shapes of the people moving through the streets. You see a man walking toward you wearing a mask made of dried leather, shaped into the snout of a pig. He walks with a deliberate, heavy gait, grunting softly as he passes. Behind him follows a line of children, each holding a small bell that tinkles with every step. The sound is delicate, almost like water flowing over pebbles, contrasting with the heavy atmosphere of the impending revelry. You find a spot to stand near a stone fountain, its water dark and still in the center of a small square. From here you can watch the town prepare for its night of inversion. You see the local magistrate, a man known for his stern judgments and expensive furs, standing on a balcony overlooking the square. He is watching the crowd below with an expression of weary indulgence. He knows that for the next 24 hours his power is a ghost. The people below him will mock his decrees, they will parody his walk, and they will elect a king of their own from the lowest ranks of the poor. He accepts this because he knows that once the festival ends, the old order will return, perhaps even stronger for having been momentarily set aside. The atmosphere is heavy with anticipation. It is the feeling of a held breath. You look up at the sky, where the first stars are beginning to pierce through the indigo veil. They look cold and distant, indifferent to the strange dramas unfolding on this small patch of earth. Yet, down here among the mud and the timber and the firelight, there is a warmth that has nothing to do with the temperature. It is the warmth of human connection, of a collective agreement to suspend the rules and see what lies beneath the surface of their daily lives. You feel a sense of displacement, as if you have stepped out of your own time and into a space where the linear progression of hours has ceased to matter. The medieval world is often portrayed as one of gray misery and constant toil, but as you stand on these cobblestones, you see the vibrant, chaotic colors of their inner lives. They are a people who live in close proximity to death and hardship, and because of that, they celebrate with a ferocity that is almost frightening to an outsider. Their festivals are not merely parties. They are essential rituals of survival. The bonfire is finally lit. A single flame licks upward, catching a dry branch, and then suddenly the whole structure erupts into a tower of orange and gold. The heat hits your face, a sudden, intense wall of energy that pushes back the chill of the evening. The light floods the square, turning the dark, looming buildings into flickering theatrical backdrops. The people around you erupt into a roar of cheers, a sound that is both joyous and primal. The bells in the cathedral begin to ring, but they are not ringing the slow, rhythmic call to prayer. They are being swung with abandon, clashing and clanging in a riotous, uncoordinated peal that shakes the very air in your lungs. You realize that the transition is complete. The sun is gone, the old laws have been tucked away in heavy iron chests, and the night belongs to the strange and the surreal. You are no longer just an observer. The energy of the crowd pulls at you, the rhythm of the bells becomes the rhythm of your own heart. You look down at your hands in the firelight and see them glowing with the same orange hue as the stones beneath your feet. The world has shifted. The familiar has become foreign, and the foreign has become the only truth. You prepare yourself to walk forward, into the heart of a celebration that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the order of the world. The cobblestones are warm now, reflecting the heat of the fire, and the shadows are leaping high against the cathedral walls, beckoning you to follow them into the night. You walk deeper into the winding streets of the city, and the air begins to change. The cool, crisp wind of the evening is now interrupted by pockets of warmth that drift from open doorways and the crowded mouths of alleys. You can hear a sound that feels out of place for this time of night. It is a chorus of bells, but they are not ringing in the rhythmic, orderly fashion of the Vespers. Instead, they are jangling with a frantic, joyful discord, as if the bell ringers have forgotten their training or have simply decided to play a joke on the very air itself. The people you pass seem to be shedding their everyday identities like old skins. You see a woman who, by her calloused hands and simple headscarf, is clearly a laundress, but she is carrying a wooden scepter topped with a carved jester's head. She catches your eye and gives a playful bow, her eyes sparkling with a temporary borrowed authority. In this moment she is not a servant of the wealthy. She is a participant in a grand, fleeting illusion. The cobblestones beneath you seem to pulse with the footsteps of hundreds of people moving toward the center of the town, drawn by an invisible tide. You follow the flow of the crowd, turning down a street so narrow that you can touch the walls on either side with your outstretched hands. The air here is cooler, trapped between the high buildings. You hear the sound of a lute being tuned, a series of bright, discordant notes that echo off the stone. Someone is singing a bawdy song in a language you only half recognize, the lyrics full of puns and double meanings that would be scandalous on any other day of the year. The boundaries between the sacred and the profane are becoming porous. You pass a small shrine set into a wall, a statue of a weeping Virgin Mary. Someone has placed a small, crudely carved wooden mask at her feet, a representation of a laughing face with an exaggerated nose. It is not an act of desecration, but rather an invitation for the divine to witness the comedy of human existence. As the twilight deepens into a true darkness, the only light comes from the torches and the growing glow of the bonfire in the plaza behind you. The shadows are no longer just absences of light. They have become active participants in the scene, dancing across the timber frames and distorting the shapes of the people moving through the streets. You see a man walking toward you wearing a mask made of dried leather, shaped into the snout of a pig. He walks with a deliberate, heavy gait, grunting softly as he passes. Behind him follows a line of children, each holding a small bell that tinkles with every step. The sound is delicate, almost like water flowing over pebbles, contrasting with the heavy atmosphere of the impending revelry. You find a spot to stand near a stone fountain, its water dark and still in the center of a small square. From here you can watch the town prepare for its night of inversion. You see the local magistrate, a man known for his stern judgments and expensive furs, standing on a balcony overlooking the square. He is watching the crowd below with an expression of weary indulgence. He knows that for the next 24 hours his power is a ghost. The people below him will mock his decrees, they will parody his walk, and they will elect a king of their own from the lowest ranks of the poor. He accepts this because he knows that once the festival ends, the old order will return, perhaps even stronger for having been momentarily set aside. The atmosphere is heavy with anticipation. It is the feeling of a held breath. You look up at the sky, where the first stars are beginning to pierce through the indigo veil. They look cold and distant, indifferent to the strange dramas unfolding on this small patch of earth. Yet, down here among the mud and the timber and the firelight, there is a warmth that has nothing to do with the temperature. It is the warmth of human connection, of a collective agreement to suspend the rules and see what lies beneath the surface of their daily lives. You feel a sense of displacement, as if you have stepped out of your own time and into a space where the linear progression of hours has ceased to matter. The medieval world is often portrayed as one of gray misery and constant toil, but as you stand on these cobblestones, you see the vibrant, chaotic colors of their inner lives. They are a people who live in close proximity to death and hardship, and because of that, they celebrate with a ferocity that is almost frightening to an outsider. Their festivals are not merely parties. They are essential rituals of survival. The bonfire is finally lit. A single flame licks upward, catching a dry branch, and then suddenly the whole structure erupts into a tower of orange and gold. The heat hits your face, a sudden, intense wall of energy that pushes back the chill of the evening. The light floods the square, turning the dark, looming buildings into flickering theatrical backdrops. The people around you erupt into a roar of cheers, a sound that is both joyous and primal. The bells in the cathedral begin to ring, but they are not ringing the slow, rhythmic call to prayer. They are being swung with abandon, clashing and clanging in a riotous, uncoordinated peal that shakes the very air in your lungs. You realize that the transition is complete. The sun is gone, the old laws have been tucked away in heavy iron chests, and the night belongs to the strange and the surreal. You are no longer just an observer. The energy of the crowd pulls at you, the rhythm of the bells becomes the rhythm of your own heart. You look down at your hands in the firelight and see them glowing with the same orange hue as the stones beneath your feet. The world has shifted. The familiar has become foreign, and the foreign has become the only truth. You prepare yourself to walk forward, into the heart of a celebration that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the order of the world. The cobblestones are warm now, reflecting the heat of the fire, and the shadows are leaping high against the cathedral walls, beckoning you to follow them into the night. You walk deeper into the winding streets of the city, and the air begins to change. The cool, crisp wind of the evening is now interrupted by pockets of warmth that drift from open doorways and the crowded mouths of alleys. You can hear a sound that feels out of place for this time of night. It is a chorus of bells, but they are not ringing in the rhythmic, orderly fashion of the Vespers. Instead, they are jangling with a frantic, joyful discord, as if the bell ringers have forgotten their training or have simply decided to play a joke on the very air itself. As you round a corner, the narrow street opens into a small square, and you find yourself standing on the edge of a scene that feels like a dream. In the center of the square, a large bonfire crackles, sending sparks dancing up toward the black velvet of the sky. But it is not the fire that holds your attention. It is the people. In the medieval world you have left behind just a few hours ago, every person had a strictly defined role. You could tell a person's profession by the cut of their tunic, their status by the color of their hood, and their wealth by the shoes on their feet. But here, in this pocket of time, the mirror has been shattered. You see a man who is clearly a laborer, his hands calloused and his shoulders broad from years of tilling the earth. Yet, he is draped in a heavy cloak of purple velvet that looks as though it was stolen from a nobleman's wardrobe. On his head sits a crown made of gilded straw, and he carries a scepter topped with a dried pig's bladder. He sits upon a makeshift throne of ale barrels, and as you watch, a local merchant, a man who normally commands great respect in the market, bows low before him, offering a mock prayer and a cup of wine. This is the mirror of inversion, the heart of the medieval winter festivals. For a few brief days the social pyramid is flipped on its head. The poor become the kings, the young become the elders, and the secular world invades the sacred. You move through the crowd, feeling the brush of wool and fur against your arms. The atmosphere is not one of violent rebellion, but of a strange, ritualized release. It is as if the entire town is taking a collective breath, letting out all the tension that has built up through a year of rigid rules and hard labor. You find yourself drawn toward the entrance of the great stone church that looms over the square. Usually this is a place of silence and bowed heads. But as you cross the threshold, the sounds of the square follow you inside, echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. The air inside is thick with the scent of expensive incense mixed with the smell of wet wool and cheap beer. The candles are lit, hundreds of them, casting a golden, flickering glow over the stone faces of saints and martyrs. At the far end of the nave, near the altar, you see a group of young men dressed in the robes of the clergy. But they are not performing a mass. They are wearing their vestments inside out. One of them, a boy no older than 15, wears the ornate mitre of a bishop. He is the boy bishop, elected by his peers to lead the festivities. He stands at the pulpit, and instead of a sermon on morality, he is telling a long, rambling story filled with jokes and local gossip. The congregation, filled with people from every walk of life, listens with a rapt, drowsy attention. You lean against a cold stone pillar, watching the shadows dance on the floor. There is a specific name for this time, a tradition known as the Libertas Decembrica or the December Liberty. It is a custom that dates back to the Roman Saturnalia, surviving through the centuries and weaving itself into the fabric of the medieval church. The authorities allowed it, perhaps even encouraged it, because they understood something fundamental about the human spirit. They knew that if a spring is wound too tight, it will eventually snap. These festivals were the release valve, a brief period where the pressure of life could be vented through laughter and parody. As you watch, a group of maskers enters the church. Their masks are carved from light wood, painted in vibrant, clashing colors. Some look like lions, others like demons with long pointed ears. They move with a slow, swaying gait, their shadows stretching long and thin across the flagstones. You notice that they are carrying a donkey decorated with ribbons and bells, right up the center aisle. This is the Feast of the Ass, a strange subset of the winter revels. The animal is led to the very front of the church, and as the mock bishop concludes his sermon, the entire congregation begins to bray like donkeys in unison. The sound is surreal, a rhythmic, haunting noise that vibrates in your chest. It is not a sound of mockery toward the divine, but a strange sort of communal play. In this moment, the boundary between the human and the animal, the holy and the profane, has been blurred. You feel a sense of profound calm as the sound washes over you. It is a repetitive, droning chorus that seems to harmonize with the flickering of the candles. You look up at the stained glass windows, where the moonlight is trying to pierce through the deep blues and reds of the glass. Outside, the world is cold and dark, but inside this space, everything is warm and upside down. You think about the people standing around you. To them, this festival is a vital part of the year. It is a reminder that while the world is often harsh and the rules are many, there is a space for the absurd. There is a space where the master must serve the servant, and where the fool is the wisest person in the room. As the braying fades into a low murmur, the boy bishop steps down from his pulpit. He begins to walk through the crowd, blessing people with a sprig of evergreen dipped in a bucket of ale. When he reaches you, he stops for a moment. His eyes are bright with the excitement of his temporary power, but there is a kindness in his face. He taps your shoulder with the wet greenery, and you feel the cool droplets of ale on your skin. It is a strange, sticky blessing, but in the context of this night, it feels entirely right. You turn and begin to walk slowly toward the side door of the church, moving away from the warmth of the central nave. The further you get from the altar, the quieter the sounds become. The laughter is muffled by the thick stone walls, and the jangling bells outside feel like a distant memory. You find yourself in a small, quiet chapel, tucked away in a corner of the cathedral. Here the air is cooler, and the only light comes from a single dying candle in a red glass holder. You sit on a wooden bench, feeling the grain of the ancient timber beneath your hands. The contrast between the chaos of the festival and the silence of this corner is sharp. You realize that the mirror of inversion is not just about the noise and the costumes. It is about the transition. It is about the moment when the world stops being what it is and becomes something else, if only for a night. It is a time for reflection, hidden behind the mask of revelry. The medieval mind was obsessed with order, with the great chain of being that linked every creature from the lowest worm to the highest angel. To break that chain even in play was a powerful act. It reminded everyone that the order was a choice, a structure built by people and sanctioned by the divine, but one that could be stepped outside of. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the distant, muffled sounds of the square. You can hear the faint thump of a drum and the high, thin note of a flute. As you sit there, the weight of the day begins to settle on you. The long walk through the city, the sights of the fire, the strange masks, and the braying in the church all merge into a single flowing tapestry of sensation. The history of these festivals is not just a list of dates and names. It is a history of feelings. It is the feeling of a cold night warmed by a communal fire, the feeling of a heavy crown made of straw, and the feeling of the world finally making sense because, for once, it makes no sense at all. The candle in the red glass holder flickers one last time and goes out, leaving you in the soft, blue darkness of the chapel. You take a deep breath, smelling the cold stone and the faint, lingering scent of incense. The night is far from over, but the frantic energy of the earlier hours has begun to mellow. The mirror of inversion has shown you its reflections, and now, it is time to move deeper into the quiet mysteries that remain. You stand up, your boots clicking softly on the floor. You walk back toward the main body of the church, but instead of joining the crowd, you find a small, heavy wooden door that leads to the cloisters. You push it open, and the hinges groan with a slow, rhythmic sound that feels like a heavy sigh. You step out into the open air of the courtyard, where the moonlight falls in perfect, silver squares on the grass. The chaos of the festival feels miles away now, though you know it is just on the other side of the wall. Here, in the stillness, you prepare yourself for the next shift in the night, as the world prepares to slowly turn itself right side up once more. The stars above are sharp and clear, indifferent to the masks and the laughter below. They have seen 1,000 such winters, 1,000 such nights where the servants played at being lords. You watch your own breath fog in the air, a small, white cloud that vanishes as quickly as it appears. The silence of the cloister is a different kind of magic, a stillness that balances the riot of the square. You find a stone bench and sit, watching the way the light catches the frost on the edges of the arches. The world is waiting, and you are waiting with it, drifting on the edge of a deep and peaceful sleep. You find yourself standing on a cobblestone square in a city of stone and shadow. The air is crisp, biting at your cheeks with the sharpness of a January morning. Above you, the spire of the cathedral pierces a gray, heavy sky. It is a massive structure, a mountain of masonry and stained glass that usually commands silence and reverence. But today, as you stand before the great wooden doors, you hear something that feels entirely out of place within those hallowed walls. You hear laughter. Not the polite, muffled chuckle of a shared secret, but a roaring, ribald, and unrestrained sound that echoes through the portico and spills out into the street. It is a sound that defies the gravity of the architecture. You push the door open, and the heavy weight of the oak gives way with a low groan. Stepping inside, the scent hits you immediately. It is the familiar smell of beeswax and frankincense, yet it is layered with something more earthly. There is the smell of roasted meats, the faint sour tang of wine, and the musk of damp wool. Your eyes adjust to the dim light, filtered through the towering windows that cast long jewel-toned shadows across the nave. But the hierarchy you expect to see has been turned upside down. This is the Feast of Fools, and for a few fleeting days, the world has been tilted on its axis. At the high altar, where the most senior officials of the church should be standing in their finest silks, you see a young man, perhaps no more than 20. He is a subdeacon, someone who usually spends his days scrubbing floors or copying manuscripts in silence. Today, however, he wears a mitre made of painted cardboard and a cape turned inside out. He holds a staff made of a dried cabbage stalk. This is the Lord of Misrule, the Bishop of Fools, and for these few days, his word is law. You watch as he leads a procession down the central aisle. The monks and clerks behind him are not walking with the measured rhythmic pace of a litany. Instead, they are dancing. Some wear masks made of leather or bark, carved into the shapes of animals or grinning demons. Others have painted their faces with soot or the dregs of wine barrels. It is a spectacle of the grotesque, a brief moment in the long dark winter where the rigid structures of the medieval world are allowed to bend and sway. Think about the life these people lead during the rest of the year. The medieval world is one of strict lines and immovable boundaries. You know your place from the moment you are born. You bow to the lord of the manor. You kneel before the priest. You follow the bells that mark the hours of prayer and work. There is very little room for spontaneity. But here, in the heart of the winter solstice season, the church allows a pressure valve to open. You see a priest playing dice on the very altar where the sacraments are usually prepared. You see another man swinging a censer filled not with precious resins, but with the pungent smoke of burnt old shoe leather, the acrid scent drifting up into the vaulted ceiling. You find a seat on a stone bench along the wall, feeling the cold of the granite seep through your cloak. The acoustics of the cathedral transform the noise. The shouting and the singing do not sound chaotic so much as they sound like a physical force, a wave of energy bouncing off the ribbed vaults and the carved faces of saints who look down from their niches with stony, unblinking eyes. It is as if the building itself is breathing, exhaling the accumulated tension of a year spent in somber devotion. Suddenly a sound cuts through the din. It is the braying of a donkey. You turn your head to see a live animal being led toward the chancel, its hooves clattering sharply against the floor. This is the prose of the ass, a strange ritual where the congregation responds to the priest not with amen, but with a chorus of imitation donkey brays. You listen to the sound. It rises and falls, a rhythmic, absurd chant that fills the vast space. It is a mockery of the sacred, yet it is performed within the sanctuary. To the outsiders who would later write of these things with horror, it seemed like madness or heresy. But as you sit here, watching the flickering candlelight play across the laughing faces, you realize it is something else. It is a moment of profound humanity. It is the recognition that even in a world governed by the divine and the eternal, there is a need for the ridiculous. The masks are particularly striking as you observe them more closely. One man near you wears the face of a lion, but the features are exaggerated, the mane made of frayed rope that catches the light like gold. Another has the long hooked nose of a mythical bird, painted in vibrant yellows and greens. These are not meant to be beautiful. They are meant to be a release from the self. Under the mask, the clerk is no longer a clerk. He is a creature of legend, a figure of the carnival who can speak truths that would otherwise be forbidden. You watch him gesture wildly, his wooden sword clattering against his hip, as he tells a story to a group of wide-eyed children who have crept in from the square. The mock sermon begins. The young bishop stands in the pulpit, looking out over the sea of faces. His voice is clear, carrying easily through the stone forest of the interior. He does not speak of theology or the lives of the saints in the way you might expect. Instead, he speaks of the virtues of the humble bean, or the miraculous properties of a well-brewed ale. He uses the complex language of the university and the church to describe the most mundane things, creating a satire that makes even the older priests in the back of the hall smile in spite of themselves. It is a clever, biting wit, a way for the young and the powerless to show that they have been watching, they have been learning, and they have their own perspective on the world. The light in the cathedral begins to shift as the afternoon wears on. The bright splashes of blue and red from the stained glass fade into a deep, velvety purple. The frantic energy of the morning begins to settle into a warm, exhausted glow. You watch the Bishop of Fools lean against a pillar, his cardboard crown tilted to one side, his face flushed from the heat of the crowd. The jokes have been told. The mock sermons have been delivered. The wine has been poured and shared. Now there is only the lingering sense of a world that has been turned over and is slowly righting itself. Scholars would one day argue about why this was allowed. They would speak of the Roman Saturnalia, the ancient festival where masters served their slaves, and wonder if these medieval revels were a ghost of that pagan past. They would suggest that the church authorities tolerated it because it was better to have a controlled explosion of joy than a slow simmer of resentment. But for you, sitting in the shadows of the great nave, those academic questions feel far away. What you feel is the physical reality of the moment. The way the cold air from the doorway meets the warmth of the crowded interior. The way the sound of a lute, played with more enthusiasm than skill, drifts over from a side chapel. The Festival of Fools is a reminder that even the most solid structures, like these massive stone pillars, are inhabited by people who need to laugh. It is a reminder that the dark of winter is not just a time for survival, but a time for storytelling and subversion. As the sun dips below the horizon, the cathedral falls into a deeper quiet. The revelers begin to filter out, their voices disappearing into the narrow, winding streets of the city. The candles are flickering low, their wicks drowning in pools of molten wax. You remain for a moment longer, looking up at the high vaults where the last of the laughter seems to be trapped, a faint vibration in the air that slowly begins to still. The world outside is cold and unforgiving. The harvest is long over and the spring is many months away. But inside these walls, for this brief window of time, the rules of the world are suspended. You feel the weight of your own responsibilities and worries begin to lift as you immerse yourself in this strange, inverted reality. The stone floors are hard, but your seat feels comfortable enough. The shadows are long, but they are soft and welcoming. You watch a single feather, perhaps from one of the performers' costumes, drift slowly through a shaft of fading light. It twirls and dances, caught in a gentle draft, moving with a grace that seems to mimic the slow, rhythmic breathing of the cathedral itself. The colors are dimming now. The vibrant reds of the stained glass have turned to a dull copper, and the blues are now deep like the midnight sea. The laughter has become a murmur, a low drone that vibrates in the chest like the purr of a great cat. You feel a sense of peace in the aftermath of the noise. The chaos was not a destruction, but a cleaning. A way to clear out the old year and make space for the new. The Bishop of Fools removes his cardboard mitre and sets it on the altar, his face now calm and reflective. The donkey is led out the side door, its hooves making a fading rhythm on the stone. You stay in your seat, watching the last of the incense smoke curl around the base of a crucifix. The cathedral is returning to its usual state of quiet contemplation, but the memory of the laughter remains, etched into the atmosphere like a secret message. It is a reminder that there is a place for everything under these high vaulted ceilings. There is a place for the solemn and the sacred, and there is a place for the foolish and the wild. As you prepare to leave this space and return to the quiet of your own thoughts, you carry that balance with you. The world is a complex tapestry of light and dark, noise and silence, and you are drifting through it all, safe and warm and ready for the rest that follows. The air in the cathedral is still now, holding on to the warmth of the crowd for just a few moments longer, before the ancient stone takes back its chill. You close your eyes for a second, and in the silence, You can almost hear the faint, ghostly echo of a donkey braying, a final, playful goodbye to the day of misrule. You walk away from the fading sounds of the marketplace and find yourself standing before the towering, weathered doors of a great stone cathedral. The air here is different. It is colder, sharper, and carries the faint, lingering scent of ancient dust and beeswax. As you push open the heavy oak door, the hinges give a long, slow groan that echoes through the vast, empty nave. The transition from the chaotic streets to this silent, hollow space is immediate. Your footsteps ring out against the cold flagstones, each step a rhythmic pulse in the stillness. The ceiling vanishes into deep, velvety shadows far above, where the ribs of the stone arches meet like the fingers of giants. It is a place designed to make you feel small, but as you move deeper into the heart of the building, you realize that the usual order of things has been turned upside down. You notice a group of people gathered near the altar, but they are not the somber, elderly canons you might expect to see. Instead, the space is filled with children. These are the choir boys, their young faces illuminated by the warm, flickering glow of hundreds of candles. They are moving with a strange, rehearsed solemnity. You find a spot near a massive stone pillar, leaning your back against the cool surface, and watch as the ceremony begins that would seem impossible at any other time of the year. It is the beginning of December, specifically the feast of St. Nicholas, and for the next few weeks the world belongs to the small and the powerless. In the center of the group, a young boy stands on a wooden stool so that the adults can reach him. He cannot be more than 10 or 11 years old. His face is scrubbed clean, his hair neatly combed, and his expression is one of intense, serious concentration. You watch as two grown priests, men who usually carry the weight of divine authority on their shoulders, begin to dress the boy in the vestments of a bishop. They move with careful, practiced motions, draped in the heavy silence of the cathedral. First, they slip a miniature alb over his head, the white linen stark against his youthful features. Then comes the cope, a heavy cloak of rich, crimson silk embroidered with threads of real gold. You can see the way the weight of the fabric pulls at his small shoulders, but he stands perfectly still, his eyes fixed on some distant point on the far wall. The transformation is mesmerizing. They place a small ornate mitre upon his head, the peaked hat of a bishop, which seems slightly too large and threatens to slip down over his brow. Finally, they hand him a crozier, a staff curved at the top like a shepherd's crook, but scaled down to fit his height. When he takes the staff in his hand, a ripple of quiet excitement passes through the other children. This is no longer just a choir boy. For a brief window of time, he is the boy bishop, the sovereign of the cathedral and the lord of the town. You watch as he is led to the bishop's throne, a massive chair of carved dark wood that dominates the choir. He climbs into it, his feet dangling several inches above the floor, and takes his seat with a dignity that feels both charming and slightly eerie. As you stand there in the shadows, you begin to understand the strange logic of this medieval world. To the outsiders who traveled here, this must have looked like a mockery of the church, a dangerous game played with the most sacred of offices. But for the people living in these cold, stone cities, the boy bishop was a living reminder of a deeper truth. They believed that in the eyes of the divine, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. By placing a child on the throne, they were enacting a physical prayer, a temporary suspension of the harsh hierarchies that governed their daily lives. You see the grown priests bow to the boy and the gesture feels sincere. For this short season, they have surrendered their power to the innocence of youth. The ceremony within the cathedral ends, and you follow the procession as it moves back out into the town. The atmosphere has changed. The sun is beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the snow-dusted cobblestones. The boy bishop is now mounted on a small pony, his crimson robes flowing over the animal's flanks like a spilled glass of wine. Behind him, the other choir boys march in two straight lines, acting as his canons and his guards. They are heading toward the town square, and you walk alongside them, your boots crunching rhythmically in the thinning snow. The townspeople have lined the streets to see their miniature king. You notice a merchant leaning out of a second-story window, tossing a handful of small copper coins into the street. The children in the crowd scramble for them, but the boy bishop remains upright and regal, raising a hand in a slow, steady blessing. It is a surreal sight. You see a blacksmith, a man with arms like gnarled oak branches and a face lined with decades of hard labor, take off his cap and bow his head as the child passes by. There is no laughter or ridicule here. The town takes this seriously. They treat the boy's words as law. If he decrees that the schoolroom shall be closed for a week, it is closed. If he demands that the local bakery provide a feast of sweet cakes for the poor, the baker complies with a smile. You follow the group as they enter a large hall where a feast has been prepared. The smell of roasting meat and spiced cider fills the air, heavy and intoxicating. Inside, the tables are arranged in a way that defies all tradition. The boy bishop sits at the head of the high table, flanked by his young attendants, while the mayors and the elders of the town sit at the lower tables, serving the children. You find a quiet corner near a roaring fireplace and sit down, the warmth of the flames seeping through your layers of wool. The crackle of the burning logs is the only sound that competes with the high, clear voices of the children as they sing songs of the season. As the evening wears on, the boy bishop stands to give a sermon. You lean forward to hear his voice, which is clear and steady, though it still carries the soft edges of childhood. He speaks of kindness, of the importance of looking after the weak, and of the fleeting nature of all earthly power. It is a strange thing to hear such wisdom coming from one so small, and you realize that the boy is likely repeating words he has been taught, but the effect is no less profound. He is a living symbol of a world turned upside down, a world where the humble are exalted and the proud are brought low. The reign of the boy bishop is destined to be short. It will last only until the 28th of December, the Feast of the Holy Innocents. As you watch the candlelight play across the boy's face, you think about how heavy that crown must feel, even if it is only made of silk and pasteboard. Soon he will return his vestments to the dark chests in the sacristy. He will go back to his lessons, back to being a boy who must obey the commands of his elders. But for now he is the center of the universe. The fire in the hall begins to burn down to a soft, pulsing red glow. The guests are beginning to drift away into the cold winter night, their breaths blooming in white clouds as they step through the door. You stay for a moment longer, watching the boy bishop as he finally relaxes, leaning his head back against the carved wood of his temporary throne. His eyes are growing heavy, and the crozier leans precarily against his shoulder. The weight of his brief reign is finally catching up with him. You stand up and quietly make your way to the exit, careful not to disturb the fading magic of the room. Outside, the world is hushed. The stars are sharp and bright in the black sky, looking down on a town that has, for a few hours, forgotten its rules and its burdens. You walk down the quiet street, the sound of your own breathing the only companion in the frost-bitten air. The image of the child king stays with you, a golden memory of a time when the world was small enough to be ruled by a boy with a wooden staff and a heart full of solemn duty. The night is deep, the air is still, and the brief reign is safe in the cradle of the winter dark. You find yourself standing on a bridge of weathered gray stone, where the edges have been smoothed by centuries of damp Atlantic mist and the passage of heavy woolen cloaks. Below you, the canal water is dark and slow, moving with the sluggish patience of a river that has forgotten the sea. It is deep into the winter months in the Flemish lowlands, a region where the earth is so flat and the sky so expansive that you feel as though you are walking within a giant, silver bowl. The air here is thick with the scent of peat smoke, wet timber, and the brine of the nearby coast. It is a quiet evening, or so it seems at first, but there is a strange tension in the air, a sense that the sturdy, brick-built world around you is about to tilt into something unrecognizable. As you walk further into the city, your boots click against the cobblestones, echoing off the tall, narrow gables of the merchant houses. These buildings lean toward one another like old friends whispering secrets across the street. In the windows, the light of tallow candles flickers, casting long dancing shadows that stretch and shrink against the damp walls. You are heading toward the town square, drawn by a sound that is difficult to place. It is not quite music and it is not quite a riot. It is the rhythmic, heavy thud of wooden clogs hitting the earth in unison, accompanied by the metallic jingle of bells that seem to be muffled by layers of heavy fabric. You turn a corner and stop. Before you, a group of figures emerges from the fog. In any other season, these would be your neighbors, the blacksmith, the weaver, the baker, and the tanner. But tonight they have shed their names and their histories. They are wearing masks. These are not the delicate, painted porcelain masks of a later century or a distant southern city. These are Flemish masks, carved from heavy blocks of lime wood or pear wood, thick with paint and age. They are grotesque and beautiful all at once. Some have noses that hook down like the beaks of predatory birds. Others have cheeks that are swollen and red, carved into permanent, wide-eyed grins that seem to mock the very idea of gravity and grief. One figure walks toward you, his movements stiff and deliberate. He wears a suit of rough linen stuffed with straw, making his body appear unnaturally bloated and round, like a grain sack come to life. Around his waist is a belt hung with heavy brass bells that groan with every step. His mask is a pale, waxen yellow with small, squinting eyes and a mouth frozen in a tiny, perfect circle of feigned surprise. He does not speak. In this festival, to speak is to break the spell. To speak is to remind the world that you are a mortal man with taxes to pay and a soul to save. Under the mask, the man is gone. There is only the spirit of the winter, the chaotic energy of the lowlands made flesh. You follow the procession as it winds through the narrow alleys. The outsiders who visited these lands in the Middle Ages, the travelers from Italy or the scholars from Paris, often wrote of these sights with a mixture of horror and fascination. They did not understand the need for this transformation. They saw the Flemish people as sober, industrious folk who spent their days counting coins and weaving the finest cloth in Europe. To see these same people don the faces of demons, animals, and fools was a shock to their refined sensibilities. They called it a madness of the marshes. But as you watch, you begin to understand. In a world of rigid hierarchies, where every man has his place from birth until death, the mask is the only door to true freedom. The group enters a wider courtyard where a large bonfire has been built. The flames are orange and violent against the indigo sky, sending showers of sparks upward to join the cold stars. The heat of the fire hits your face, a sharp contrast to the biting wind that whistles through the gaps in the buildings. The masked figures begin to dance. It is not a graceful dance. It is a heavy, grounded stomping, a communal effort to wake the earth from its frozen slumber. The sound is hypnotic. Thud, jingle, thud. Thud, jingle, thud. You feel the vibration in the soles of your feet, rising through your legs and settling in your chest. You notice a carver sitting on a low stool near the edge of the light. He is an old man, his hands gnarled and stained with walnut oil. Even now, during the height of the festivities, he is working. He has a small knife in his hand, and he is shaving thin curls of wood from a new mask. He looks up at you, his eyes reflecting the firelight, and gestures for you to come closer. He holds up a mask that is only half finished. One side of the face is smooth and human, while the other is still a rough, jagged block of wood. He explains in a voice as dry as autumn leaves, that the mask does not hide the truth. It reveals it. He tells you that every man carries a second face inside him, a face of hunger, of joy, or of ancient, unspoken fears. The carver merely brings that face into the light so it can be danced away before the planting season begins. The masks are heavy, sometimes weighing several pounds. They are held in place by leather straps that bite into the skin, and the air inside them becomes hot and moist with the wearer's breath. To wear one is an act of endurance. You see a young man take his mask off for a moment to catch his breath. His face is flushed and steam rises from his hair in the cold night air. For a second he looks disoriented, as if he is not quite sure which world he belongs to. Then he pulls the wooden face back down, the leather straps snap into place, and he vanishes once more into the character of the bearded forest giant. The festival continues into the deep hours of the night. You see masks that represent the personification of the winds, with puffed-out cheeks and swirling patterns carved into the forehead. You see the faces of long-dead ancestors, their features simplified into haunting, iconic lines. There are masks with real animal horns attached to the temples, and masks decorated with the feathers of crows and owls. The outsiders thought this was paganism, a lingering shadow of the old woods that the church had failed to clear. Perhaps they were right. But here, in the damp heart of the lowlands, the old ways and the new ways have woven themselves together like the threads of a tapestry. The movement of the crowd begins to slow as the fire burns down to a glowing mountain of embers. The frantic energy of the dance is replaced by a heavy, comfortable exhaustion. The masked figures begin to lean against the stone walls or sit on the benches outside the taverns. The bells, which had been a constant clamor, now only ring in soft, stray notes as someone shifts their weight. You find yourself sitting on the edge of a dry fountain, watching the mist roll back in from the canals. It wraps around the ankles of the dancers, swallowing the bottom half of their straw-stuffed suits until they appear to be floating in a sea of white cloud. You think about the masks being put away tomorrow. They will be wrapped in oily rags and tucked into wooden chests in attics and cellars. They will sit in the dark for a year, the wood aging, the paint cracking slightly, waiting for the sun to grow weak again. The people will go back to being merchants and laborers. They will bow to the priest and obey the magistrate. But they will carry the memory of the weight on their faces. They will remember the feeling of looking out through two small holes and seeing a world that was no longer bound by rules. The silence of the Flemish night is deep and profound. It is the kind of silence that only exists in places where the water and the land are constantly negotiating their boundaries. You close your eyes for a moment, and you can still see the flickering orange light against the wooden grins. You can still hear the rhythmic thud of the clogs. The dampness of the air feels like a soft blanket, cooling the heat of the fire and the intensity of the night. The city is settling down, the stones soaking up the last of the warmth. You stand up and begin the slow walk back toward your lodgings. The streets are empty now, the fog having reclaimed the territory. Every few steps, you look back, half expecting to see a wooden face peering out from an alleyway, but there is only the gray haze and the dim glow of the lanterns. The festival has served its purpose. The chaos has been invited in, given its due, and now it has been asked to leave so that the order of the spring can eventually arrive. You feel a sense of peace, a quiet recognition of the strangeness of the human heart. The lowlands are vast and flat, but beneath the surface of the quiet water and the heavy soil, there are rhythms as old as the earth itself. You walk into the mist, your own face hidden by the shadows of your hood, moving through the stillness of a world that is finally ready to sleep. You step across the threshold of the great stone hall, leaving the biting chill of the winter night behind you. The transition is immediate and overwhelming. One moment, your breath was blooming in the air like pale ghosts, and the next, you are enveloped by a wave of heat that smells of roasted boar, dried herbs, and the pungent, sweet scent of fermented cider. This is the heart of the midwinter celebrations, a time when the world as you know it has been turned completely upside down. You look around the room and for a moment you feel a sense of disorientation. The heavy oak beams above are draped in greenery, but not with the careful precision of a church. Instead, ivy and holly have been flung across the rafters in wild, tangled heaps, their dark leaves glistening in the firelight. As you move further into the room, your boots thud softly on the rushes that cover the floor. These dried grasses have been mixed with lavender and thyme, and as people dance and stumble over them, a faint, herbal fragrance rises to meet you. You see the flickering light of 100 tallow candles, their golden glow casting long, dancing shadows against the tapestries that line the walls. But the figures depicted in those tapestries, the noble hunters and graceful ladies, seem far removed from the reality of the scene unfolding before your eyes. At the far end of the hall, where you would expect to see the lord of the manor sitting in his high-backed chair of state, there is a different sight altogether. A man who, only yesterday, might have been a humble stable hand or a tanner's apprentice, sits perched upon the velvet cushions. He wears a crown made of gilded straw, and his cloak is a patchwork of mismatched silks, shimmering in shades of crimson, saffron, and emerald. This is the Lord of Misrule. He has been chosen by the luck of a hidden bean found in a cake, or perhaps by the rowdy consensus of his peers, to lead the festivities for the 12 days of Christmas. In this space, for this brief window of time, his word is the only law that matters. You watch as he raises a wooden scepter which is topped with a carved jester's head, and lets out a booming laugh that echoes through the vaulted ceiling. Beside him, his court is a chaotic reflection of a true royal household. There are men dressed as bishops in robes made of coarse sackcloth, their mitres fashioned from stiffened paper. There are women wearing masks of leather that resemble the faces of birds and foxes. You see a knight whose armor is made of painted wood, clattering as he performs a clumsy dance for the amusement of the crowd. To an outsider, someone visiting from a more disciplined land or perhaps a traveler from a distant century, this scene would appear to be one of pure madness. It is a subversion of every rule that keeps medieval society functioning. In the world outside these doors, everyone has a place. The peasant serves the knight serves the lord, and the lord serves the king. But here, within the circle of the Lord of Misrule's influence, that hierarchy has been shattered. You see the true master of the house standing by the sideboard, wearing a simple linen apron. He is pouring wine into the cups of his own servants, his face relaxed into a smile that is both weary and amused. He has surrendered his authority for the duration of the feast, a ritual sacrifice of status intended to ensure the stability of the coming year. You find a place to sit on a low wooden bench, leaning your back against the cool stone of a pillar. From this vantage point, you can observe the rhythmic pulse of the celebration. The music is a constant, droning hum of bagpipes and the rhythmic beat of a tabor drum. It is not the refined music of the court, but something more ancient and primal. It fills your ears and settles in your chest, a steady vibration that seems to match the beating of your own heart. People are moving in a circular dance, their shadows stretching and shrinking as they pass the great central hearth. The fire there is a roaring beast, fueled by a massive log that was dragged in with great ceremony at the start of the week. The heat from the flames is intense, making the air shimmer and blur the faces of the dancers. You notice a group of travelers standing near the entrance, their heavy traveling cloaks still dusted with a fine layer of snow. They look on with wide, uncertain eyes. They are outsiders, perhaps merchants from a city where the laws are more rigid, and they do not know how to interpret what they are seeing. They watch as a mock trial is convened in the center of the floor. The Lord of Misrule calls forward a young man who has been accused of the crime of being too sober. The punishment, decreed with a dramatic flourish of the straw crown, is for the man to drink a large flagon of spiced ale while standing on one leg. The crowd erupts in cheers and catcalls, and even the travelers find themselves caught up in the infectious energy of the moment, their initial shock softening into a cautious curiosity. This is the essence of the festival. It is a safety valve for the pressures of a rigid society. For a few days, the heavy weight of duty and the constant struggle for survival are set aside. You can feel the tension leaving your own shoulders as you sink deeper into the atmosphere of the hall. The air is thick and warm, acting like a heavy blanket that muffles the worries of the outside world. There is no talk of taxes or harvest here. There is only the immediate reality of the fire, the food, and the strange, beautiful chaos of the court. As the night progresses, the Lord of Misrule calls for the feast to begin in earnest. Large wooden platters are carried out, piled high with meats and breads. You see a great pie, its crust decorated with intricate patterns of dough, and when it is cut open, a cloud of steam rises up, carrying the scent of venison and dark spices. There are bowls of apples roasted with honey, their skins bursting to reveal soft, golden centers. You are handed a piece of bread and a slice of meat, and the simple act of eating becomes a meditative experience. The textures are rich and varied, the flavors bold and comforting. The Lord of Misrule stands and begins to lead a procession around the hall. He moves with a rhythmic, swaying gait, his bells jingling on his shoes and sleeves. Each step he takes is punctuated by a sharp, metallic sound that cuts through the low roar of the crowd. People join in behind him, forming a long, winding snake of humanity that weaves between the tables and pillars. You watch the colors of their costumes blur together in the dim light. The reds, the blues, and the yellows all soften into a muted, nocturnal palette. The shadows on the walls grow longer as the candles burn down, their wax dripping in slow, frozen ripples down the sides of the iron holders. The outsiders who were so shocked at the beginning have now been absorbed into the mass. One of them is wearing a crown of ivy, laughing as he tries to keep pace with the rhythm of the drum. This is the power of the Lord of Misrule's court. It levels all distinctions, turning strangers into companions and masters into servants. It is a temporary world, a fragile bubble of disorder that will burst as soon as the sun rises on the final day of the festival. But for now it is the only world that exists. You feel a sense of profound stillness amidst the noise. It is the paradoxical peace of a world that has stopped making sense. There is no need to think, no need to plan, and no need to worry. You are simply a witness to this ancient, strange tradition. The fire in the hearth has settled into a deep, glowing red, its flickering tongues of flame casting a soft light over the tired faces of the revelers. Some have already fallen asleep on the benches, their heads resting on their arms, lulled into a deep slumber by the warmth and the repetitive drone of the music. The Lord of Misrule returns to his throne, his straw crown slightly tilted on his head. He looks out over his temporary kingdom with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He has fulfilled his role, guiding his people through the darkest days of the year with laughter and absurdity. You watch as he leans back and closes his eyes, his chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. The chord is winding down, the energy of the room shifting from the frantic pace of the dance to the quiet, heavy atmosphere of a winter night. You lean your head back against the stone pillar, the cool surface a pleasant contrast to the warmth of the hall. The sounds of the room begin to fade into a gentle hum. The jingling of bells, the crackle of the fire, and the low murmur of voices all blend into a single soothing tapestry of sound. You close your eyes, and the image of the golden hall remains behind your eyelids, a glowing ember in the vast darkness of history. The world outside is still cold and silent, the snow falling softly on the empty fields, but here in the heart of the Misrule, you are safe and warm. The strange festivals of the past are not just stories of chaos, but reminders of the human need to occasionally let go of the reins and drift into the comforting embrace of the unknown. You remain there, suspended in the soft, rhythmic breathing of the hall, as the Lord of Misrule's reign slowly fades into the quiet shadows of the night. You step out from the heavy wooden doors of the hall and feel the immediate transition of the air. It is no longer the thick, scented warmth of the feast, but a crisp, cooling night breeze that carries the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. You find yourself standing on a narrow, winding street paved with uneven stones that glisten under the faint light of a crescent moon. The silence here is deep, but it is not empty. It is a waiting silence, the kind that precedes a sudden shift in the atmosphere. You begin to walk, your footsteps light and rhythmic, echoing softly against the timbered walls of the houses that lean over the path like silent guardians. As you move deeper into the heart of the village, a new sound begins to register. It is faint at first, a metallic clatter that seems to dance on the edge of your hearing. It does not have the melody of a lute or the steady rhythm of a church bell. It is discordant, jagged, and strange. You turn a corner and the sound grows louder. This is what the locals call the rough music. In France they might call it the chivalry. In the west of England you would hear it referred to as a skimming ton ride. No matter the name, the intent is the same. It is the sound of a community asserting its unwritten laws, a cacophony designed to shame those who have stepped out of line. You pause in the shadow of a low stone archway, watching as a flickering light appears at the far end of the street. It is not the steady glow of a lantern, but the wild, dancing orange of torches held high. As the procession draws closer, the noise becomes a physical presence. You hear the frantic beating of wooden spoons against copper kettles. You hear the rhythmic clanging of heavy iron ladles hitting the bottoms of upturned buckets. There is the rattle of pebbles inside dry gourds and the harsh, braying sound of a horn made from a hollowed-out animal bone. It is a symphony of the kitchen and the barnyard, turned into a weapon of public ridicule. You see the crowd now and they are transformed. In the daylight, these are the farmers, the tanners, and the weavers you might pass without a second thought. But tonight, in the torchlight, they wear their coats inside out. Some have blackened their faces with soot from the hearth, while others wear grotesque masks made of stiffened leather or carved wood. They move with a strange, exaggerated gait, dancing and jeering. At the center of this swirling mass of noise and shadow, you see the focus of their attention. Two figures are being led through the streets, though they are not walking on their own. They are seated upon a single weary-looking donkey. They are sat back to back, facing away from each other. One of them, a man, holds a distaff, a tool traditionally used by women for spinning wool. The woman behind him brandishes a heavy wooden ladle, mockingly threatening to strike him. You realize that this is a living tableau, a piece of street theater designed to broadcast a private scandal to the entire world. Perhaps they are a couple whose domestic life has become a matter of public concern. Perhaps the husband has allowed himself to be dominated by his wife in a way that the medieval mind finds threatening to the social order. Or perhaps they have committed an act of infidelity that has soiled the reputation of the parish. You watch the faces of the neighbors who line the street. There is no laughter of the kind you heard at the feast. This is a different sort of mirth, one that is edged with a sharp, cold judgment. The rough music serves as a trial where the jury is the entire village. You see a young man standing near you, his hands stained with the blue dye of his trade. He is not shouting, but his eyes follow the donkey with a grim intensity. To him and to everyone else here, this is not just a prank. It is a necessary ritual to purge the community of disorder. If one household falls into chaos, they believe the entire village is at risk of divine displeasure or social collapse. The procession moves slowly, ensuring that every household has a chance to witness the spectacle. You follow at a distance, staying in the cool shadows. The noise is constant, a wall of sound that vibrates in your chest. You notice the details of the costumes now. Some men have tied bundles of dried corn husks to their belts, which rustle like dead leaves with every step. Others carry long poles topped with effigies made of straw and old rags, dressed in clothes stolen from the victim's own laundry lines. These straw figures bob and weave in the air, mimicking the movements of the shamed couple below. You think about the psychology of this moment. For the people being led on the donkey, the world has shrunk to the sound of those clanging pans. There is no escape from the noise. It follows them into their homes, it rings in their ears long after the torches have been extinguished. It is a sonic cage. You can see the way they huddle, eyes cast down toward the muddy ground, trying to disappear within themselves while being the center of every gaze. This is the power of the rough music. It does not use the gallows or the dungeon. It uses the weight of public opinion, the crushing force of being made an outsider in your own home. The parade reaches the village green, a wide expanse of grass that looks silver in the moonlight. Here, the noise reaches a final, deafening crescendo. The participants circle the couple, their shadows stretching long and thin across the grass. You hear a voice rise above the din, a man standing on a wooden crate, reading out a list of grievances in a rhyming, mocking verse. He speaks of broken promises, of roles forgotten, and of the balance of the household being overturned. Each verse is met with a fresh outburst of the rough music, a rhythmic punctuation of tin and iron. As you stand there, the cool air of the night begins to settle deeper into your bones. You realize that while this festival feels chaotic, it is governed by a very strict set of rules. The rough music is not an act of random violence. It is a choreographed expression of communal values. In a world without a modern police force or a complex legal system for domestic disputes, the village turned to the sound of the kettle and the drum. It was a way to vent frustrations and to enforce a moral code without shedding blood. Slowly the energy of the crowd begins to ebb. The torches are lowered, and the harsh clanging of the pans softens to an occasional, tired tap. The couple is allowed to dismount, and they disappear into the darkness of their own doorway, the heavy thud of their bolts sliding home marking the end of their public ordeal. The villagers begin to disperse, their inside-out coats pulled tight against the late-night chill. They speak in low murmurs now, the adrenaline of the mock trial replaced by the quiet exhaustion of the hour. You walk back toward the center of the village, the silence returning in waves. The streets are empty once more, but the air still feels charged with the echoes of the noise. You look down and see a single wooden spoon lying on the cobblestones, forgotten in the excitement. You leave it there, a small monument to the night's events. You understand now that the medieval world was not just a place of kings and knights, but a place of intense, intimate community pressure. Every sound had a meaning, and even the most discordant noise could be a tool for maintaining the fragile peace of the village. You find yourself back near the great hall where your journey began. The torches there have burned down to glowing embers, casting a soft, red light onto the stone walls. The transition from the structured chaos of the Lord of Misrule to the judgmental roar of the rough music has shown you the two sides of the medieval soul. One side craves the release of the world turned upside down, while the other side fears the actual loss of order and uses the sound of the kitchen to bring it back into line. You lean against a cool stone pillar, closing your eyes for a moment. The phantom sound of the clanging pan still resonates in your mind, but it is fading now, replaced by the steady rhythmic chirping of a cricket in the tall grass nearby. The night is reclaiming its stillness. You feel the weight of the history around you not as a series of dates on a page, but as a lived experience of sound, shadow, and the deep human need to belong. The echoes of the rough music are finally silent, leaving only the soft sigh of the wind through the eaves of the houses. You stand in the quiet, a witness to the strange, vibrating heart of a world that understood the power of a well-timed noise. The air is thin and carries a sharp, metallic chill that tells you winter has not quite surrendered its hold on the valley. You stand at the edge of a cobblestone square in a town nestled somewhere in the foothills of the Alps. It is the middle of the 14th century, a time when the boundaries between the sacred and the everyday are as thin as the morning mist clinging to the cathedral spires. You pull your heavy wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the rough texture of the fabric against your skin. The sky is a pale, bruised purple, the color of a plum that has been left too long in the sun, and the light is just beginning to catch the edges of the high, narrow gables of the timbered houses. You are here for a specific reason. You have heard whispers of a ritual that seems to an outsider both deeply holy and strangely childlike. It is the day of the procession, a day when the town prepares to welcome a guest that is neither flesh nor blood, yet is treated with a reverence usually reserved for kings. You look toward the great arched doors of the church, which are currently closed and silent. Around you, the town is waking up in a way that feels hushed and expectant. People are moving with a deliberate slowness. You see a woman shaking out a colorful rug over a wooden railing. You see a group of children gathering bundles of green branches, though they are not palms, for palms do not grow in this cold soil. Instead, they carry sprigs of boxwood and willow, their silver catkins soft like the fur of a kitten. Then you hear it. A low rhythmic sound that vibrates through the soles of your boots. It is the sound of heavy wheels turning on stone. The church doors groan open, the sound echoing off the stone walls of the square. Out of the darkness of the nave, a wooden figure emerges, mounted on a platform. This is the palm cell, the palm donkey. You watch as the figure is wheeled slowly into the light. It is a life-sized carving of a donkey, its ears upright and alert, its wooden coat painted a soft, dusty gray. On its back sits a figure of Christ, carved from the same heavy oak, dressed in robes of faded crimson and gold. The craftsmanship is remarkable. You can see the individual lines of the donkey's mane and the gentle, knowing expression on the face of the rider. The platform is supported by 4 large wooden wheels, and as it moves, it creates a steady, hypnotic grinding sound. You find yourself falling into step with the crowd. There is no shouting, no frenetic energy. Instead, there is a collective, swaying movement as the procession begins its journey through the winding streets. You are walking behind the donkey now, part of a slow human tide. To your left, a group of elderly men in dark tunics are chanting in Latin, their voices low and gravelly, blending with the sound of the creaking wheels. The scent in the air changes as you move. The smell of damp stone and wood smoke is joined by the sweet, resinous aroma of the evergreen branches being waved in the air. You notice how the people react as the wooden donkey passes them. You see a blacksmith, his leather apron stained with soot, step out from his forge and bow his head deeply. He reaches into a basket and scatters dried rose petals onto the path of the wheels. You see a group of women laying down their best cloaks on the muddy ground, creating a path of vibrant blues and greens for the wooden animal to roll over. To an outsider, this might look like a strange form of puppetry, a piece of theater that has blurred the lines of reality. But as you look at the faces of those around you, you realize that for them, this is not a play. This is a bridge. The wooden donkey is a vessel, a way to pull a story from the distant, dusty past and place it directly into the mud and cold of their own lives. You continue to walk and the streets become narrower. The overhanging upper stories of the houses almost touch, creating a tunnel of shadow. Here, the sound of the chanting and the rolling wheels becomes louder, trapped between the walls. You focus on the motion of the donkey's wooden legs, which are carved in a position of mid-stride. The light flickers across the painted wood, making it seem for a moment as if the ears are twitching or the tail is swaying. It is an optical illusion born of the half-light and the rhythmic pace of your walk, but it is enough to make you feel a sense of strange, quiet wonder. As a guide through this history, I want you to consider why this particular festival shocked those who came from elsewhere. Imagine a merchant from a distant land, perhaps someone from the South where rituals are more rigid and formal, or a reformer from a later century who believes that any image is a distraction from the spirit. To them this looks like a toy being worshipped. They see the absurdity of a wooden donkey being pulled through the mud. They might find it comical or even blasphemous. But you, standing here in the cool morning air, see something different. You see a community trying to make the divine something they can touch, something they can walk beside. The procession reaches the center of the market square. The sun has finally cleared the rooftops, and the golden light spills over the wooden figure, making the gilt on the robes sparkle. The crowd comes to a halt. You stop as well, feeling the sudden weight of the silence. A priest in a heavy embroidered cope steps forward and begins to speak. His voice is a steady cadence, a series of vowels that rise and fall like the hills surrounding the town. He is recounting the story of the entry into the city, but he speaks of it as if it is happening right now in this square on this very dirt. You find yourself leaning against the cool stone of a fountain, watching the scene unfold. The donkey remains stationary, its glass eyes reflecting the sky. There is a profound stillness in the way the townspeople stand. They are waiting for something, though you are not sure what. It is the waiting that is the most immersive part of the experience. It is the collective breath held in anticipation of a blessing. Eventually, the priest finishes his oration. He takes a bundle of hyssop and dips it into a silver bowl held by an acolyte. He flings the water toward the wooden donkey and the crowd. You feel a few cool droplets land on your forehead. The procession begins to move again, but this time it is returning to the church. The mood has shifted. The solemnity is still there, but there is also a sense of completion. The donkey has done its work. It has carried the weight of their devotion through the streets, and now it can return to the quiet shadows of the side chapel, where it will wait for another year. You watch as the heavy wheels disappear back through the church doors. The crowd begins to disperse, but they do so slowly, as if reluctant to leave the atmosphere they have created. You walk back toward the square, the sound of the wheels still echoing in your ears. You see the discarded branches on the ground, some crushed by the weight of the platform, their scent still sharp and green. You see the rose petals, now pressed into the damp earth, a trail of faded red marking the donkey's path. This was the strange festival of the palm cell, a moment where a wooden animal became the center of a town's universe. It was a practice that would eventually be banned in many places, seen as too rowdy or too superstitious by the stern eyes of later generations. They would see the donkey as a foolish thing, a relic of a time when people didn't know better. But as you stand in the thinning mist, you feel that they might have missed the point. The donkey was a way to make a long journey together. It was a way to walk a mile in the shoes of a story. The town settles back into its daily rhythm. The blacksmith returns to his forge, and the rhythmic clanging of his hammer begins to replace the chanting of the monks. The woman pulls her rug back inside, and the children go off to find other games. You stay for a moment longer, looking at the marks in the mud left by the wheels. They are deep grooves, two parallel lines that stretch across the square and disappear into the alleyways. You follow them with your eyes until they fade into the shadows. You feel a sense of profound calm, a quietness that comes from having witnessed a ritual that is both ancient and intimately human. The air is still cold, but the sun is higher now, and you know that spring is finally truly on its way. You turn away from the square, carrying the image of the wooden donkey with you, a steady, patient presence in the shifting tides of history. You walk slowly, your own footsteps joining the many that have trodden these stones before you, moving through the quiet, breathing world of the past. The path beneath your feet begins to change, softening as you leave the dry, echoing stones of the town behind. The transition is gradual, almost imperceptible at first. The air grows cooler and carries the heavy, sweet scent of damp earth and crushed mint. You are moving toward the edge of the great woodland, a place where the boundaries between the human world and the wild world become thin and blurred. In this medieval landscape, the forest is not just a collection of trees. It is a living, breathing entity, a source of both sustenance and mystery. As you walk, the light filters through the new leaves of spring, casting long, swaying shadows across the mossy ground. You find yourself at the beginning of a festival that has long puzzled those who come from far away. To a traveler from a distant city or a cleric from a foreign land, what happens here might seem like a glimpse into a forgotten, older time. They would see the villagers gathered at the forest edge, not to hunt or to gather wood, but to invite the forest itself into their homes. You watch as the young men of the village disappear into the thickets of oak and hawthorn. They are looking for something specific, a spirit that they believe dwells in the deep green shadows. This is the season of the Green Man. You may have seen his face before, perhaps carved into the high, silent rafters of a stone cathedral or hidden in the decorative borders of a prayer book. His is a face made entirely of leaves, with vines trailing from his mouth and foliage blooming from his eyes. He is a paradox, a wild, untamed figure who nonetheless sits at the very heart of the community. In the village, they do not just carve him in stone. They bring him to life. You see a group of people working together to build a strange and beautiful structure. It is a towering cone of wicker and wood, taller than a man and wide enough to hide someone inside. They call this the Jack in the Green. You watch as they begin to dress the frame. This is a slow, rhythmic process. They weave long strands of ivy around the base, the dark, waxy leaves providing a thick foundation. Then come the branches of hawthorn, heavy with white blossoms that look like fallen snow against the green. They add bundles of meadowsweet and bluebells, their delicate stems tucked carefully into the gaps. As the structure grows, it ceases to look like a man-made object. It begins to look like a small, solitary hill or a dense thicket that has somehow learned to stand upright. You can smell the fragrance of the cut greenery, a sharp, grassy aroma that fills the clearing. There is a sense of quiet focus among the workers. They are not just decorating a costume. They are creating a vessel for the spirit of the season. To an outsider, this sight is startling. It is as if the very essence of the woods has been captured and shaped into a silent, leafy sentinel. When the construction is finished, a young man steps inside the hollow center of the wicker cone. He takes up the weight of the structure on his shoulders. Suddenly, the pile of leaves and flowers shivers and begins to move. It is a heavy, swaying motion, like a tree caught in a sudden breeze. The Jack in the Green begins to walk, and you follow him as the procession starts its journey from the forest toward the village. The sound of the festival is unique. It is not the grand, soaring music of a church choir, but something more rhythmic and earthbound. You hear the steady heartbeat thrum of a goatskin drum and the high, piercing melody of a wooden pipe. The music seems to pull you forward, matching the pace of your breathing. The people around you are not shouting. They are chanting softly, a low murmur of voices that sounds like the wind moving through the canopy. They are welcoming the green world into the world of men. As the procession enters the village streets, the contrast is striking. The leafy giant moves past the timber-framed houses and the stone wells. The bright green of the fresh leaves stands out against the muted browns and grays of the buildings. People come to their doorways to watch, and you see them reach out to touch the leaves as the Jack passes by. They believe that a single leaf plucked from this walking forest will bring luck and fertility to their homes for the coming year. To an outsider, this behavior might look like madness or a strange form of worship. But for those living here, it is a necessary ritual to ensure that the winter is truly dead and that the life-giving warmth of the sun has returned. You walk alongside the Jack, noticing the small details of the costume. You see the way the sunlight catches the dew still clinging to the moss. You see the occasional flash of a human eye through the thick foliage, a reminder that there is a person inside this walking tree. But as the afternoon wears on, it becomes harder to remember that. The figure moves with a strange, non-human grace. It does not walk so much as it undulates, its leafy skirts brushing against the ground with a soft, shushing sound. The procession leads to the village green, where the festivities reach a quiet peak. There is no great oration or formal ceremony. Instead, there is a sense of communal relief. The Jack in the Green circles the maypole, his heavy movements creating a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The dancers join in, their colorful ribbons weaving around the tall wooden mast. You find a place to sit on the grass, the blades cool against your skin. You watch the interplay of light and shadow as the sun begins its long, slow descent toward the horizon. The medieval mind did not see a sharp division between the sacred and the natural. For them, the green man was a symbol of the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. He was the mystery of the seed that rots in the ground only to burst forth as a green shoot. He was the power of the forest that could swallow a field if left untended. By bringing him into the village, they were making peace with that power. They were acknowledging their dependence on the earth. As the evening shadows stretch across the green, the atmosphere shifts from celebratory to reflective. The music slows down. The pipe player breathes long, low notes that seem to hang in the still air. The Jack in the Green eventually comes to a halt in the center of the square. It is time for the final act of the festival. In some places, the leaves are stripped away and shared among the crowd. In others, the structure is ritually dismantled, the greenery returned to the earth from which it came. You watch as the young man finally emerges from his leafy shell. He looks tired but peaceful, his face smudged with the green juice of crushed stems and the dark soil of the woods. He has spent the day as a symbol of something vast and ancient, and now he returns to being a simple villager. The wicker frame stands empty now, a skeleton of what it once was, yet the air around it still feels charged with the energy of the day. The outsiders who watched this would have gone home with stories of a wild, green god that walked among the people. They would have spoken of the strange, silent figure and the way the villagers treated it with such reverence. But for you, sitting here in the deepening twilight, it feels less like a shock and more like a quiet understanding. You feel the connection between the people and the land they inhabit. It is a bond forged in the soil and the seasons, a relationship that requires these strange, beautiful moments of theater to remain strong. The stars begin to appear, faint pinpricks of light in the deepening blue of the sky. The village is quiet now. The scents of the festival, the hawthorn and the damp moss, still linger in the air, mixing with the wood smoke from the cottage chimneys. You feel a profound sense of stillness. The world is at rest. The green spirit has been welcomed, the rituals have been observed, and the cycle of the year continues its steady, inevitable turn. You lean back, the grass cushioning you, and listen to the final, faint whispers of the wind in the distant trees, a soft reminder of the wild world that waits just beyond the edge of the clearing. The day is done, and the peace of the ancient forest seems to settle over everything like a heavy velvet blanket. You step out from the shadow of the heavy trees and find yourself standing upon a gentle rise that overlooks a valley. The transition from the deep woods to this open space is like waking from a dream into a different kind of dream, one filled with the soft, golden light of a sun that refuses to fully disappear. In this time and place, the summer solstice is not merely a date on a calendar, but a living, breathing presence that hangs in the air like the scent of ripening hay. You feel the grass beneath your feet, still warm from the day, and you notice how the light has turned a peculiar shade of amber. It is the longest day of the year, a moment when the world seems to hold its breath at the very peak of its power before the slow descent into the coming autumn. As you walk down the slope toward the village nestled in the hollow, you begin to see the first signs of the festival. This is St. John's Eve, a night when the veil between the ordinary world and the extraordinary world is said to grow thin. To a traveler from a distant land or a different century, the sight would be both beautiful and unsettling. You see smoke beginning to curl upward from the village square, thin ribbons of white and gray that drift lazily against the darkening blue of the sky. This is not the smoke of a cooking fire or a simple hearth. This is the beginning of the midsummer bonfires, the sacred flames that have burned on this night for as long as anyone can remember. You reach the edge of the village where the houses are built of timber and mud, their thatched roofs looking like the backs of great sleeping animals in the twilight. The air here is different. It is thick with the smell of wood smoke, but also with the fragrance of crushed herbs. You see bundles of St. John's wort, fennel and white lilies hanging over doorways and tucked into the eaves. These plants are believed to hold their greatest power tonight, gathered while the dew was still on them to protect the inhabitants from the wandering spirits that are said to roam the fields when the sun is at its highest. You walk past a stone well where the villagers have scattered flower petals across the surface of the water, a quiet offering to the hidden depths. In the center of the village square, a massive pile of wood has been assembled. It is a tall, sturdy structure of oak logs, dry brush and old timber. You watch as the village elders approach with torches. There is no shouting or loud music yet. Instead, there is a focused, rhythmic quality to their movements. They are performing the ritual of the need fire. In many places, all other fires in the village have been extinguished. The new fire must be struck from wood or stone, a fresh and pure flame to cleanse the community and bless the coming harvest. You hear the crackle as the first sparks catch. A small plume of orange light blossoms at the base of the woodpile, and you feel a sudden gentle wave of heat against your face. To an outsider, perhaps a monk traveling from a distant monastery or a merchant from a southern city, this scene might look like a remnant of a more ancient and wilder world. Indeed, the Church has often looked upon these fires with a mix of caution and acceptance, rebranding them as the fires of St. John the Baptist, the one who came to prepare the way. But as you stand there watching the flames climb higher, you can see that for the people here, the fire is something much more personal. It is a guardian. You watch as the young men of the village begin to gather around the growing blaze. They are not merely watching it. They are preparing for the leap. One by one they run toward the fire. You hold your breath as you see a figure silhouetted against the bright orange glow, rising into the air and sailing over the crackling logs. This is a test of courage but also a prayer for good fortune. They believe that the higher one jumps over the midsummer fire, the higher the flax and corn will grow in the fields that year. You see the sparks fly upward into the night, mingling with the first few stars that have appeared in the sky. The heat is intense now, a vibrant, pulsing thing that pushes back the shadows of the surrounding buildings. You find a place to sit on a low stone wall, feeling the warmth seep into your bones as you observe the rhythm of the night. Further up the hill, away from the main square, you notice a group of people struggling with a large wooden wheel. They have wrapped the wheel in straw and are now setting it alight. This is the solar wheel, a direct representation of the sun itself. As it begins to burn, they push it over the edge of the hill. You watch the flaming circle tumble and bounce down the dark slope, a miniature sun rolling toward the river at the bottom of the valley. If the wheel reaches the water while still burning, it is a sign of a bountiful year. You track its progress, the flickering light illuminating the grass and the wild hedges as it descends. It is a hypnotic sight, a moving spark in the vast, quiet darkness of the countryside. The festival is not just about the fire, though. It is about the quiet moments in between. You see women walking through the meadows at the edge of the village, their skirts brushing against the tall grass. They are looking for specific plants that only reveal their secrets on this night. You hear the soft murmur of their voices as they talk about the properties of the herbs they find. Fern seed, they whisper, if gathered at exactly midnight, can make a person invisible or allow them to understand the language of the birds. You watch as they tuck small yellow flowers into their hair and belts. The atmosphere is one of shared secrets and ancient knowledge, a way of connecting with the earth that feels deeply rooted and unshakable. As the night deepens, the intensity of the flames begins to subside. The great logs have collapsed into a glowing mountain of embers. The air is still warm, but the sharp crackling has given way to a low rhythmic hiss. The villagers move closer to the heat now, their faces bathed in a soft, flickering red light. They talk in low tones, sharing stories of past midsummers and of the ancestors who stood in this same spot 100 years before. There is a sense of continuity here, a feeling that time is not a straight line but a circle that returns again and again to this moment of peak light and warmth. You notice a traveler standing near you, someone who looks as though they have come from a great distance. They are dressed in heavy wool and carry a weathered staff. They are watching the embers with a look of profound wonder. To them, this festival is a shock to the system, a display of folk belief that seems to ignore the strict boundaries of the world they know. But as they watch a group of children carefully walking through the cooled ashes to bless their feet, the traveler's expression softens. They see that this is not about rebellion or darkness. It is about the human need to find light in the middle of the year, to celebrate the warmth while it is here, and to carry a small piece of that fire in their hearts through the long months ahead. The smell of the hearth is everywhere now. It is the scent of charred oak and toasted grain. You feel a deep sense of peace settling over the village. The high energy of the evening has dissipated, replaced by a quiet contentment. You stand up from your stone wall and walk slowly back toward the edge of the village. The embers are still glowing, a bed of rubies in the center of the square, providing a soft light for those who linger to talk or simply to watch the patterns in the coals. The sky above is a deep, velvety indigo, and the air is cool and sweet with the smell of the dewy earth. You look back one last time at the fading hearth. The midsummer sun will rise soon enough, but for now, the village is cradled in the warmth of the fire they built together. The strange festivals, the burning wheels, and the leaping flames are all part of a larger story, a way for people to map their lives onto the turning of the seasons. You feel the weight of your own fatigue, a gentle and welcome heaviness that mirrors the settling of the night. The embers continue to glow, providing a steady rhythmic pulse of light that guides you as you move away from the square and back toward the quiet, waiting stillness of the countryside. Everything is slow, everything is calm, and the warmth of the hearth stays with you as the world hums a low, golden lullaby. You step into the morning light and find that the air has changed. It is no longer the crisp, thin air of a standard winter dawn. Instead, it is thick, heavy with the scent of rendering fat and toasted grains. You are standing at the edge of a village square in the middle of the 14th century, and today is a day where the rules of the world are quietly set aside. It is the day before the Great Fast, the day when the last of the winter stores must be consumed before they spoil or become forbidden. You breathe in deeply and you can smell the richness of it. There is the scent of sizzling lard, the sweet, earthy aroma of fried dough, and the sharp, metallic tang of cold iron pans heating over open flames. You walk slowly toward the center of the square. Beneath your boots, the ground is a mixture of packed earth and scattered straw, damp from the morning mist. The village is usually a place of quiet labor, but today there is a low, constant thrum of activity. It is not a frantic energy, but rather a purposeful, heavy sort of preparation. Everywhere you look, people are moving with a strange rhythmic focus. They are carrying large wooden crates filled with eggs, jugs of cream that are thick and yellow, and slabs of salted meat that have been saved specifically for this moment. To your left, a group of women has gathered around a massive outdoor hearth. They are wearing heavy wool cloaks to ward off the chill, but their faces are flushed from the heat of the fire. You watch as one of them lifts a heavy iron ladle, pouring a thin, pale batter into a pan that has been greased with a thick layer of pork fat. The sound it makes is a soft, comforting hiss. The batter bubbles and rises, turning a deep, golden brown at the edges. This is the Shrove Tuesday ritual, the final indulgence before the world turns toward ash and silence. You watch the steam rise in plumes, curling upward toward the gray sky, carrying with it the scent of toasted flour and honey. As you continue your walk, the sounds of the village begin to layer over one another like a soft blanket. There is the rhythmic thumping of a churn, the clatter of wooden bowls being stacked on long trestle tables, and the distant, melodic ringing of a blacksmith's hammer, though even that sound feels muted today, as if the village is holding its breath. You notice that the houses are draped with evergreen boughs and colorful ribbons that have faded over the winter months. They sway gently in the breeze, brushing against the timber frames with a dry, papery sound. In the center of the square, a large wooden platform has been erected. It is sturdy and simple, built from rough-hewn planks that still smell of pine resin. This is where the glutton will perform his last dance. You see him now, standing near the edge of the platform, surrounded by a small crowd of laughing children. He is a man chosen for his size and his spirit, dressed in a costume that is meant to embody the very idea of excess. He wears a tunic made of mismatched patches of bright fabric, and around his waist is a belt hung with empty gourds and wooden spoons that clatter together with every step he takes. His face is hidden behind a mask made of painted leather, showing a wide, permanent grin and cheeks that are flushed a deep, vibrant red. You find a place to stand near the edge of the square, leaning against a stone well that is cool to the touch. The stones are worn smooth by centuries of use, and you can feel the faint vibration of the village's activity through the soles of your feet. The glutton begins his dance. It is not a fast dance. It is slow, deliberate, and heavy. He moves with a swaying motion, mimicking the weight of a man who has eaten his fill of everything the earth can provide. He raises a large wooden flagon toward the sky, and the crowd cheers, a low and rumbling sound that echoes off the surrounding stone walls. As the morning progresses toward noon, the feast begins in earnest. You are invited to sit at one of the long wooden tables. The wood is scarred with knife marks and stained with the ghosts of many meals past. A large wooden bowl is placed in front of you, filled with fritters that are still warm from the fire. They are dusted with a fine coating of gray salt and drizzled with dark, thick forest honey. You pick one up and you can feel the warmth radiating into your palm. The texture is crisp on the outside and soft, airy on the inside. It is the taste of pure, unadulterated energy, a final gift of the harvest before the lean weeks of spring. The conversation around you is a steady, low hum. People are talking about the weather, the coming planting season, and the dreams they had during the long winter nights. There is no talk of work today. There is only the presence of the food and the company of neighbors. You watch as a man across from you breaks a loaf of dark rye bread, the crust crackling like dry leaves. He shares it with his neighbor, and the gesture is simple, quiet, and profound. The air grows warmer as the sun climbs higher, though it remains filtered through a layer of soft, translucent clouds. The light is pale and pearlescent, casting long, soft shadows across the square. You watch the way the light catches the grease on the lips of the revelers, making them shine like polished bronze. There is a sense of communal release, a collective exhale. For months, these people have lived in the dark, conserving their strength and their food. Today they are letting go. They are burning through their reserves, both physical and emotional, in a grand display of defiance against the cold. The glutton continues his dance on the platform, his movements becoming even slower and more exaggerated. He represents the winter itself, the heavy, sleeping part of the year that is finally being sent away. He stumbles purposefully, pretending to fall asleep, only to be woken up by the gentle prodding of a wooden staff held by a child dressed as a green sapling. This is the play of the seasons, a story told without words, played out on a stage of rough wood and damp earth. You notice the smaller details now, the things that usually go ignored. The way a stray dog waits patiently by the hearth, its tail thumping softly against the ground. The way the smoke from the fire seems to hang in the air, creating a veil that softens the edges of the buildings. The way the bells of the cathedral in the distance begin to toll, a deep, bronze sound that vibrates in your chest. The bells are a reminder that the time is short. The feast will end when the sun touches the horizon. You take a sip of cider from a heavy ceramic mug. It is cool and tart, tasting of bruised apples and autumn leaves. It cuts through the richness of the fried dough and the salted meat, cleansing your palate. You feel a sense of deep, heavy contentment. Your limbs feel weighted and your mind is slow and peaceful. The world around you is a tapestry of brown, gold, and gray, a warm and earthy palette that feels safe and enclosing. As the afternoon begins to wane, the pace of the festival slows even further. The large platters of food are mostly empty now, leaving behind only crumbs and streaks of honey. The fires have burned down to glowing embers, radiating a steady, pulsing heat that keeps the chill of the evening at bay. The glutton has climbed down from his platform and is now sitting among the villagers, his mask pushed up onto his forehead. He looks tired but happy, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the dying fires. The music, which had been a simple arrangement of pipe and drum, fades into a single droning note. It is a peaceful sound, like the hum of a bee in a summer garden. You close your eyes for a moment and you can feel the transition happening. The air is cooling, the moisture in the mist beginning to settle on your cloak like 1,000 tiny diamonds. The smell of the food is being replaced by the clean, sharp scent of the coming night. You stand up from the table, your movements slow and deliberate. You feel the weight of the day in your bones, a good weight, the weight of a day well spent. You walk back toward the edge of the square, passing by the now quiet hearths. The women are packing away their iron pans, wrapping them in thick cloths to protect them from the damp. Everything is being put in its place. The excess is gone, consumed and transformed into the warmth that will carry these people through the coming weeks of reflection and restraint. You look back one last time at the square. The shadows have stretched out, long and thin, reaching toward the center of the village. The colorful ribbons on the houses are now dark, swaying in a breeze that has turned cold and sharp. The laughter has turned into quiet murmurs, and one by one, the villagers are retreating to their homes, carrying the last of the warmth with them. The glutton's last dance is over. The silence of the fast is beginning to settle over the rooftops like a soft fall of snow. You turn away and begin your walk into the quiet evening, the taste of honey and salt still lingering on your tongue, and the steady rhythmic pulse of the village fading into the distance. The world is turning its face away from the feast, moving toward a time of stillness and shadow, and you move with it, wrapped in the heavy, golden memory of the day. Imagine that you are a traveler from a distant land, a person who has spent your life in a region where the rules of the world are as rigid and unyielding as the mountains. You have spent weeks on the road, your boots coated in the dust of 3 different kingdoms, and your mind is filled with the quiet, predictable rhythms of the highway. You know what to expect when you enter a town. You expect to see the baker at his oven, the merchant at his stall, and the priest in his rectory, each person occupying a specific and sacred place in the hierarchy of life. But as you crest the final hill before the gates of a great cathedral city, the air begins to vibrate with a sound you cannot quite identify. It is not the holy tolling of bells, nor is it the usual chatter of a marketplace. It is a discordant symphony of shouting, braying, and wild rhythmic drumming that seems to pulse from the very earth itself. As you pass through the heavy timber gates, you stop in your tracks and for a moment, you wonder if you have crossed a border into a world of dreams or perhaps a world of madness. You are an outsider, a witness to a reality that has been turned completely upside down. In the middle of the main thoroughfare, a man you recognize by his tattered woolen tunic as a lowly stable hand is being carried on a litter of silk and gold. He wears a crown of gilded straw and holds a scepter made of a dried leek. Around him, the people of the town are bowing with exaggerated, mocking reverence, their faces painted in garish streaks of white and red. This is the world you have entered, a place where the king is a fool and the fool is a king. You walk deeper into the city, your footsteps slow and hesitant on the cobblestones. The atmosphere is thick with the smell of roasting meat, cheap ale, and the sharp, metallic scent of the winter air. You find yourself standing outside the great stone doors of the cathedral, the heart of the community. In your home, this is a place of absolute silence and profound dignity. But here today the doors are flung wide, and the sounds of laughter are spilling out into the square like water from a broken dam. You step inside, and your eyes struggle to adjust to the dim light of 1,000 flickering candles. What you see inside the nave causes you to catch your breath. A group of men dressed in the heavy ornate robes of high-ranking clergy are not kneeling in prayer. Instead, they are wearing their vestments inside out, the rough seams and loose threads exposed for all to see. They are wearing masks made of leather and wood, carved into the likenesses of grinning demons or braying donkeys. One of them stands at the high altar, not reading from a holy book, but holding a large piece of greasy sausage which he waves like a relic. The air is thick with the smoke of incense, but it is mixed with something else, the smell of burning old leather and kitchen scraps, a deliberate profanation that feels both terrifying and strangely hypnotic. You lean against a cold stone pillar trying to make sense of the scene. To you, as a traveler from a place of order, this looks like the end of civilization. You see a young boy no more than 12 years old, dressed in the full regalia of a bishop. He wears a mitre that is much too large for his head, slipping down over his ears, and he holds a heavy silver staff. This is the boy bishop, and for this brief window of time, his word is law. He issues commands that are both nonsensical and profound. He orders the wealthy merchants to serve wine to the beggars in the street. He commands the town guards to lay down their spears and dance a jig. And the most shocking thing to you is that everyone obeys. They obey with a frantic, desperate joy, as if this temporary chaos is the only thing keeping them sane in a world that is usually so harsh and unbending. You move toward the back of the cathedral, trying to find a quiet corner where you can observe without being swept up in the tide. From this vantage point, you see the faces of the people more clearly. Behind the masks and the paint, you see the exhaustion of a year spent in back-breaking labor. You see the lines of worry etched into the foreheads of mothers who have spent the winter wondering if the grain will last. In this moment of ritualized rebellion, those lines seem to soften. The laughter you hear is not just a sound of amusement, it is a release. It is a safety valve for a society that lives under the constant pressure of duty, faith, and survival. A man walks past you, wearing a heavy horse collar around his neck and ringing a small handbell. He stops, looks you in the eye, and lets out a loud, convincing bray like a donkey. You flinch back, but he only grins and moves on, disappearing into the swirling crowd of dancers. You realize that in this festival, the normal boundaries between humans and animals, between the holy and the profane, have been intentionally blurred. There is a song being sung now, a low, droning chant that sounds like a parody of a hymn. It is the Prose of the Ass, a song dedicated to the beast of burden that carried the Holy Family. The congregation responds to every verse by shouting a loud, collective imitation of a donkey's cry. The sound echoes off the high vaulted ceiling, vibrating in your chest. As the afternoon begins to fade into a bruised purple twilight, the intensity of the festival only grows. You follow the crowd out of the cathedral and into a smaller side street, where the shadow of the buildings makes the torchlight seem even brighter. Here, the spectacle becomes even more surreal. You see a group of people performing a play on a makeshift stage made of wooden planks and barrels. They are acting out a scene where a peasant sues the sun for shining too brightly, and the judge, a man dressed as a giant crow, sentences the sun to be locked in a cellar for the night. The audience roars with approval, tossing crusts of bread at the actors in a gesture of mock appreciation. You find a small tavern that seems slightly less chaotic than the street, though even here the world is tilted. The innkeeper is sitting in a chair by the fire while his guests are the ones drawing the ale and carrying the heavy trays of food. You sit on a low stool in the corner, wrapped in your travel-worn cloak, and watch the flickering shadows on the wall. To you, the traveler, this entire day feels like a fever dream. You think of the letters you will write home, the stories you will tell of the city where the priests wore masks and the donkeys were honored in the sanctuary. You wonder if anyone will believe you. You wonder if you even believe yourself. But as you sit there, the warmth of the fire beginning to seep into your bones, you start to feel a shift in the energy of the town. The manic edge of the laughter is beginning to dull. The shouting is turning into a low, rhythmic hum. The sun has fully set now, and the bitter cold of the medieval night is pressing in against the windows. The festival is not over, but it is changing. It is moving from the sharp, shocking inversions of the daylight into the deep, heavy mysteries of the night. You see the boy bishop being carried past the window of the tavern, his mitre now crooked and his small face pale with exhaustion. The people following him are no longer dancing. They are walking with a slow, heavy tread, their torches burning low. The transition is subtle but unmistakable. The world is beginning to prepare for its return to order. The masks will soon be put away in wooden chests. The inside-out robes will be turned right side out and brushed clean. The stable hand will return to his hay, and the bishop will return to his throne. You finish your mug of thin, spiced ale and stand up, your limbs feeling heavy and leaden. You find a small room in the attic of the inn, where the sound of the wind whistling through the thatch is the only music. As you lie down on the straw mattress, you can still hear the distant, faint braying of a lone reveler somewhere in the labyrinth of streets below. It is a lonely sound now, a reminder of the strange, beautiful madness you witnessed. Your mind drifts back through the day, replaying the images of the gilded crown made of straw and the greasy sausage waved in the cathedral. You realize that what seemed like disbelief was actually a form of awe. You have seen the hidden heart of this place, the secret world that lives beneath the surface of the everyday. You understand now that the festival was not an escape from reality, but a way to make reality bearable. The shock you felt as an outsider was the shock of seeing the human spirit in its most raw and unfiltered state. The darkness of the room is absolute, save for a single sliver of moonlight that falls across the floor. You close your eyes, and the images of the masks begin to dissolve into the gray mists of sleep. The town is quiet now, the heavy stone walls of the cathedral standing silent guard over the sleeping revelers. The world has turned, the inversion is ending, and the familiar gravity of the normal world is pulling everything back into its proper place. You breathe in the scent of the dry straw and the cold night air, and you feel yourself sinking into the stillness, a traveler who has seen the impossible and is finally ready to rest. You leave the flickering torchlight of the street behind and step through a small, heavy wooden door. As it swings shut, the chaotic sounds of the festival become a muffled, distant hum. You find yourself in the transition between the world of the common people and the world of the high authorities. Here the air is different. It is cooler and carries the sharp, acidic scent of iron gall ink and the dry, dusty aroma of ancient parchment. You are standing in a long vaulted corridor where the only light comes from narrow windows set high in the stone walls. Your footsteps are soft on the rushes that cover the floor, but every sound seems to echo, bouncing off the ribs of the ceiling like a whispered secret. You walk toward a room where a single candle flickers on a heavy oak desk. This is the scriptorium of a high church official, a place of silence and order. You see a man sitting there, his shoulders hunched under a heavy wool cloak. He is a scholar, perhaps a member of the Faculty of Theology in Paris or a delegate to the Council of Basel. He is the personification of the institutional memory that finds the Feast of Fools not just annoying but deeply dangerous. You watch as he dips a long quill into an inkwell. The scratching sound of the nib against the vellum is rhythmic and steady, a sharp contrast to the irregular beating of drums you heard outside. He is writing a letter of condemnation. In his mind, the world is a great chain of being, a perfect ladder where everyone has a place. To him, the sight of a subdeacon wearing a mitre or a priest dancing in the street is like a crack in the foundation of a building. He believes that if the lower parts of the hierarchy are allowed to mimic the higher parts, the entire structure of the universe might collapse. You move closer and look over his shoulder, though the Latin script is dense and full of abbreviations. You can feel his frustration in the way he grips the quill. This is the pulpit's vain protest, a struggle that has lasted for centuries. You think about how many times this scene has played out. In the year 1244, and again in 1431, and most famously in 1444, these men sat in these quiet rooms and wrote the same angry words. They called the festivals an abomination. They called them a return to the dark days of paganism. They described the scenes you just witnessed with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. They wrote about the sausages eaten on the altar and the old shoes burned in the censers. To them these were not just jokes. They were a form of spiritual pollution. You sit down on a wooden bench against the wall and watch the shadows dance. The scholar pauses, rubbing his eyes. He is tired. He knows that his letters and decrees are often ignored. He sends a mandate to a distant cathedral, demanding that the feast be abolished under pain of excommunication, but the letter takes weeks to arrive. By the time it is read, the festival is already over, the wine has been drunk, and the participants have returned to their normal lives, waiting for the next year to do it all again. You realize that there is a profound disconnect between the high theory of the church and the lived reality of the cathedral staff. The man at the desk believes in a religion of the mind and the soul. He sees the body as something to be disciplined and controlled. But the people outside, the ones he is writing against, see religion as something that involves the whole person, including their laughter and their hunger. You feel the weight of this ideological battle in the silence of the room. It is a quiet war fought with ink and paper against the loud, messy energy of the human spirit. The scholar sighs and leans back, his chair creaking. He looks at a crucifix on the wall, seeking some kind of divine reassurance that his work matters. You imagine the letters being sealed with heavy wax and carried by messengers across the snowy mountain passes of Europe. They travel to the Council of Basel, where bishops and theologians gather in grand halls to debate the fate of the church. You can almost see them there, sitting in rows, their faces illuminated by hundreds of candles. They speak in long, flowing sentences about the need for reform. They argue that the Feast of Fools brings the church into disrepute in the eyes of the laity. They are worried about what the outsiders think, the very outsiders you have been traveling with. But you know something that the scholar does not fully grasp. You know that the festival is a pressure valve. You have felt the tension in the streets, the hardness of the medieval life, and the absolute necessity of this brief moment of release. If the scholar succeeds in his protest, if he manages to truly silence the bells and stop the dancing, what will happen to all that pent-up energy? You wonder if he understands that by trying to preserve the order, he might be inviting a more violent kind of chaos. The room is very still now. The only sound is the occasional pop of the candle flame. You feel a sense of pity for this man. He is trying to hold back the tide with a broom. He is a guardian of a tradition that is constantly being reshaped by the people who live it. He views the church as a static monument of stone and law, while the people outside see it as a living, breathing community that must occasionally laugh at itself to survive. The protest is vain not because it is wrong, but because it is fighting against a fundamental human need to turn the world upside down. You watch as he finishes his page and sets the quill down. He sprinkles fine sand over the wet ink to dry it. The sound of the sand hitting the parchment is like the sound of soft rain. It is a soothing, repetitive noise that makes your eyes feel heavy. You lean your head back against the cold stone wall. The scholar begins to tidy his desk, moving with a deliberate slowness that suggests he has done this every night for decades. He is a man of habit in a world that, for 1 week a year, has abandoned all habit. You think about the words he has written. They are full of power, backed by the threat of eternal punishment and the weight of tradition. And yet they are remarkably fragile. They are just marks on a piece of animal skin. Tomorrow, a group of young clerks will find this decree and they might use it as a prop in their next play. They might have a mock bishop read the condemnation aloud to a roaring crowd, turning the very weapon used against them into a source of further mockery. You see the irony that the scholar cannot. His protest provides the very material that the festival needs to function. Without the law there is no joy in breaking it. Without the hierarchy there is no thrill in subverting it. The scholar stands up and blows out the candle. For a moment the room is plunged into a deep, thick darkness. Your eyes slowly adjust to the faint moonlight coming through the high windows. The scholar leaves the room, his footsteps fading away down the long corridor. You are left alone in the scriptorium, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 years of rules and regulations. The silence here is heavy, a different kind of silence than the one you found in the straw of the barn. This is the silence of the archive, the silence of things that are meant to be remembered but are often forgotten. You feel a sense of calm descending over you. The conflict between the pulpit and the street is an old one, and it is not your conflict to settle. You are merely an observer, a traveler moving through the layers of the past. You can appreciate the scholar's desire for beauty and order, just as you appreciated the wild energy of the maskers in the square. Both are part of the story. Both are necessary to understand the world you are visiting. You close your eyes and listen. In the absolute quiet of the cathedral's heart, you can still hear the very faint rhythmic thumping of a drum from somewhere far across the city. It is like a heartbeat, persistent and unavoidable. It reminds you that no matter how many decrees are written, the sun will rise, the seasons will turn, and the people will find a way to dance. The protest is a part of the ritual itself, a necessary shadow to the festival's light. You feel yourself sinking into the stillness of the bench. The air is cool on your skin, and the scent of the old books is like a warm blanket. You are safe here, tucked away in the shadows of history. The great debates of the 15th century fade into the background, becoming nothing more than a gentle murmur in your mind. You are drifting now, caught between the rigid lines of the scholar's Latin and the fluid, shifting shapes of the masked dancers. The world outside is vast and strange, but here, in the dark scriptorium, everything is contained. Everything is accounted for. You can let go of the need to understand or to judge. You can simply be. You breathe in the quiet, the deep, ancient quiet of the stone, and you feel the last bits of tension leave your body. The quill is silent. The parchment is dry. The protest is finished for tonight. You are ready to follow the scholar into the world of sleep, where all hierarchies are dissolved and every traveler is equal. In the darkness, the cathedral feels less like a fortress of law and more like a great, sheltering vessel, carrying you through the night. You close your eyes and the sounds of the world fall away entirely, leaving only the soft, steady rhythm of your own breath. Everything is still. Everything is at rest. The pulpit has had its say and now at last there is peace. You stand at the edge of the town square and the world is finally, mercifully quiet. The torches that line the main thoroughfare have burned down to blackened stubs of wood, and the heavy scent of tallow and wood smoke hangs low in the damp morning air. It is that strange, liminal hour before the sun has truly committed to the sky. The world is a series of deep grays and muted blues and soft shadows. You can feel the weight of your own fatigue pressing down on your shoulders like a heavy woolen blanket. The adrenaline of the festival has seeped away, leaving behind a hollow sort of peace. You look down at your feet and notice how the mud has churned into a thick soup. It was trampled by hundreds of dancing feet that are now tucked away in quiet cottages and drafty haylofts. You reach up and touch your face. Your skin feels cool and slightly damp. You realize you are still holding the mask you wore for the last 3 days. It is made of stiffened leather and painted with a jagged, laughing grin that seems so vital and hilarious under the flickering light of the bonfires. Now in the cold light of dawn, it looks small. It is just a piece of treated animal skin and a bit of earth pigment. You wonder how such a simple thing could have given you the courage to speak so boldly to the magistrate or to dance with such abandon in front of the cathedral doors. The magic of the masquerade does not reside in the leather or the paint, but in the collective agreement of the town. Yesterday, everyone agreed that the world was upside down. Today that agreement has expired. You walk slowly toward the fountain at the center of the square. The water is still and dark. A few hours ago, this basin was surrounded by people shouting and singing songs that would make a bishop blush. Now the only sound is the rhythmic drip of water falling from the stone lip into the pool below. It is a lonely sound. You lean against the cold stone and look at the debris left behind. There is a discarded ribbon of bright yellow silk caught in the mud. There is a broken wooden flagon resting near the steps of the church. These are the fossils of the celebration. They are the remnants of a time when the rules of the world were suspended. As you look around, you see the shutters of the houses beginning to creak open. It is a slow and cautious sound. The people of the town are waking up to a reality that feels heavier than the one they left behind. The baker who dressed as a king must now return to his oven. The apprentice who mocked his master must now return to the forge and take up the hammer. The social order is descending back upon the village like a heavy fog. It is not a sudden change, but a gradual tightening of the invisible strings that hold society together. You can almost feel the air growing thicker as the hierarchy reasserts itself. You turn your gaze toward the great cathedral. Its tall spires are beginning to catch the first faint hints of light from the east. The stone is cold and gray. During the festival, the church was a stage for the ridiculous. It was a place where the sacred and the profane danced together in a dizzying whirl. But now the heavy oak doors are closed. The incense that drifted through the nave yesterday has settled into the floorboards. The priests are preparing for a different kind of service. They are preparing to wash away the memory of the laughter and the masks. They are preparing to remind the people that the time for play is over and the time for penance has begun. You walk away from the square and enter a narrow alleyway. The cobbles are slippery and the air smells of old stone and damp earth. You see a man sitting on a wooden bench outside a tavern. He is still wearing the tattered remains of a fool's costume. His bells give a weak, lonely jingle as he shifts his weight. He is staring at his hands, which are stained with the soot of last night's fire. He does not look up as you pass. He is caught in that painful transition between the dream of the festival and the reality of the day. For a few days he was someone else. He was a creature of chaos and joy. Now he is just a man with tired eyes and a long day of labor ahead of him. You think about how necessary this transition is. The medieval world is a place of rigid structures and hard truths. Without the masquerade, the pressure of those structures might become too much to bear. The festival is the safety valve. It allows the steam to escape so that the engine of society does not explode. But the cost of that release is the morning after. The cost is the fading of the colors and the return of the quiet. You feel a sense of melancholy, but it is not a sharp or painful feeling. It is a soft and rhythmic ache, like the pulse in your feet after a long walk. The light is growing stronger now. You can see the individual stones in the walls of the houses. You can see the moss growing in the cracks of the pavement. The world is becoming sharp and defined again. The blur of the carnival is being replaced by the precision of the morning. You watch as a woman comes out of her house with a broom. She begins to sweep the steps, her movements methodical and sure. She is clearing away the dust of the celebration. She is preparing her home for the mundane tasks of the day. This is the real work of life. The dancing and the singing are the exceptions, while the sweeping and the baking are the rules. You find yourself standing at the edge of the river. The water is high and moving quickly, carrying bits of straw and wood from the town. You watch a small wooden boat bobbing on the surface. It is empty, drifting wherever the current takes it. It reminds you of how the people felt during the height of the masquerade. They were untethered. They were drifting on a current of collective madness. But now the river is just water again. It is a tool for the mill and a path for the merchants. The mystery has been stripped away by the rising sun. You reach into your pocket and find a small wooden coin, a token given out during one of the parades. It has no real value, but it feels smooth and warm in your hand. You consider throwing it into the river, but you decide to keep it instead. It is a small piece of the dream that you can carry into the waking world. It is a reminder that the masquerade happened, even if the evidence is being swept away by brooms and washed away by the rain. The bells of the cathedral begin to toll. It is a deep and resonant sound that vibrates in your chest. This is not the frantic ringing of the festival. This is the steady rhythmic call to prayer. It is the sound of the clock restarting. It is the sound of the world returning to its proper place. You listen to the echoes as they bounce off the stone walls and fade into the distance. Each strike of the bell seems to hammer a nail into the coffin of the carnival. The masquerade is truly over. You turn back toward your own home, walking with a slow and steady pace. Your body is tired, but your mind is clear. The strange sights you saw and the strange things you did are already beginning to feel like scenes from a book you read long ago. The edges of the memories are softening. The shocks and the scandals are losing their teeth. In a few days they will be stories told over a quiet fire. In a few weeks, they will be nothing more than a hazy blur of color in the back of your mind. You reach your door and pause for a moment. You look back at the town one last time. The sun has finally broken over the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. The world is bright and clear and uncompromising. You open the door and step inside. The air inside is cool and smells of dried herbs and old wood. It is a familiar smell. It is the smell of your life. You set the leather mask on a wooden table near the entrance. It looks out of place there, a relic from a different world. But you do not hide it away. You leave it there as the light of the morning fills the room. You have returned from the masquerade, and though the colors have faded, the stillness of the house feels like a gift. You sit down in a heavy wooden chair and listen to the silence. It is a deep and profound silence, the kind that only comes after a great noise. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of your own breathing match the quiet of the room. The world is as it should be. The order has been restored. The long day is beginning, but for now, there is only the peace of the fading light and the soft memory of the dance. You step away from the dying glow of the communal fire, leaving the last charred logs to crumble into white ash. The air has turned crisp and sharp, a cooling balm after the heat and frantic energy of the festival. As you walk down the narrow, winding path toward the heart of the parish, your boots make a rhythmic, hollow sound against the packed earth and the occasional smooth cobblestone. The noise of the celebration has faded entirely now, replaced by a silence so heavy and profound that it seems to have a weight of its own. This is the hour when the medieval world truly shifts its character. The boundaries of the village, which felt so wide and porous during the daylight revelry, now shrink back to the small, flickering circles of light within the homes and the silent, towering presence of the stone church. You notice how the moon reflects off the timber frames of the houses. These buildings lean toward one another over the narrow street, their upper stories jutting out as if they are whispering secrets in the dark. In the daylight, these structures are hives of industry, filled with the sounds of weaving looms, the clatter of cooking pots and the chatter of neighbors. But now they are hushed. Behind those thick walls of wattle and daub, the families of the parish have begun their first sleep. You imagine them lying together for warmth, the scent of dried lavender and old straw rising from their mattresses. In this era, sleep is not the singular, uninterrupted block of time we know today. It is a journey taken in stages. They have settled into their first sleep, a deep and heavy slumber that follows the physical exhaustion of a day spent dancing, singing, and feasting. The darkness here is absolute. Without the modern intrusion of streetlights or the glow of distant cities, the night is a velvet curtain. You look up and see the stars, brighter and more numerous than you have ever seen them. They seem closer, as if you could reach out and touch the cold, crystalline light of the constellations. To the people sleeping in these cottages, the stars are not just distant suns, but markers of time and divine order. They guide the traveler and signal the changing of the seasons. You stand still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the subtle variations of the shadows. You can see the dark outlines of the haystacks in the fields beyond the houses, looking like sleeping giants slumped against the horizon. As you continue your walk, you pass the village well. The water inside is still and black, reflecting nothing but a sliver of the moon. In the silence, you can hear the faint, distant lowing of a cow in a nearby barn and the soft, rhythmic breathing of a horse tethered under a lean-to. These sounds are comforting, a reminder that life continues even in this profound stillness. The medieval parish is a living organism that never truly stops, it only slows its pulse. You feel a sense of peace settling over you, a quietude that reaches deep into your bones. The frantic pace of the festival, with its strange masks and loud music, feels like a dream from another lifetime. Now there is only the cool air and the gentle gravity of the night. You reach the edge of the churchyard, where the grass is long and silvered with dew. The parish church stands as a silent sentinel, its stone walls glowing faintly in the moonlight. This building is the anchor of the community, the place where every life in the village begins and ends. At night, it takes on an even more powerful presence. The high, narrow windows are dark, but you know that inside, a single lamp might be burning near the altar, a tiny spark of light in the vast, hollow space of the nave. The church does not sleep. It watches over the living and the dead, its bells silent for now, but ready to announce the coming of the dawn. You walk along the perimeter of the stone wall, feeling the rough texture of the masonry under your fingers. The stones are cold and damp, holding the memory of the evening mist. You think about the generations of people who have walked this same path, seeking the same stillness after the chaos of a feast day. For them, this silence was not just a lack of noise, but a sacred space. It was a time for the soul to rest and for the body to recover from the relentless toil of medieval life. The festival was a necessary release, a burst of color and sound that broke the monotony of the seasons, but the stillness that followed was equally important. It was the reset, the moment of calm before the cycle began again. In the distance you hear the faint cry of an owl. It is a long, mournful sound that ripples through the air and then vanishes, leaving the silence even deeper than before. You find yourself walking slower and slower, your movements becoming more deliberate. The weight of your cloak feels good against your shoulders, a heavy, protective layer against the night. You pass a small cottage where the fire has been carefully banked for the night. This is the ritual of the couvre-feu, the covering of the fire. The embers are tucked under a layer of ash to keep them glowing until morning, a metaphor for the life of the parish itself. The outward fire is gone, but the warmth remains hidden, waiting to be breathed back into flame when the sun rises. You stop by a wooden gate that leads out toward the open fields. The smell of damp earth and ripening grain is stronger here. The fields are a sea of silver gray, moving slightly in a breeze you can barely feel on your face. This is the landscape that sustains the village, the source of their bread and their beer. In the stillness of the night, the fields seem to be breathing, a slow and steady inhalation of the cool night air. You lean against the gate, looking out toward the dark line of the forest in the distance. To the medieval mind, the forest at night was a place of mystery and danger, the home of spirits and shadows. But from here, within the safety of the parish boundaries, it is simply a dark border to the world you know. You realize that you are waiting for the moment of the second sleep. Soon, some of the villagers will wake for a brief period in the middle of the night. They might sit by the hearth, talk quietly, or pray in the soft darkness before drifting back into their final, most restorative rest. This quiet interval is a time of great reflection, a bridge between the dreams of the first sleep and the reality of the coming day. You feel as though you are part of that bridge now, standing in the gap between the noise of the festival and the labor of tomorrow. The stillness of the sleeping parish is not empty. It is full of the presence of the people who live here, their hopes, their fears, and their exhaustion. You can almost feel the collective heartbeat of the village, a slow and steady rhythm that matches your own breathing. The air seems to grow even heavier, pulled down by the sheer weight of the night. You find yourself yawning, a deep and satisfying stretch that travels through your whole body. The coolness of the air is no longer sharp, but soothing, inviting you to find your own place of rest. You turn back toward the center of the village, your footsteps now almost silent on the soft ground. The moon has climbed higher, casting shorter, darker shadows. The world is reduced to simple shapes and muted colors. The reds and yellows of the festival banners are now just shades of gray, swaying gently in the dark. The world has been stripped of its distractions, leaving only the essential elements of stone, wood, water, and earth. It is a humble world, but in this light, it possesses a quiet majesty that is far more profound than any celebration. As you reach the door of the place where you will sleep, you take one last look at the sleeping parish. The church tower stands tall against the starry sky, a dark finger pointing toward the heavens. The houses are huddled together, protecting the warmth within. The fields are silent, the animals are still, and the fire is covered. You feel a deep sense of belonging to this moment, a witness to the profound peace that follows the storm of human activity. You push the door open, the hinges making a soft, familiar creak. The air inside is warm and smells of beeswax and dried herbs. You are ready now to join the rest of the parish in their quiet journey through the night. The stillness is complete. The day is truly over, and the only thing that remains is the soft, rhythmic pulse of a world at rest. You settle into the darkness, letting the heavy blankets of the night fold over you, until the memory of the festival and the stillness of the parish merge into the velvet embrace of sleep.